right, good evening. Calling to order the West Hartford Public Schools Board of Education regular meeting for Tuesday, January 20th, 2026 at 7 p.m. Imani, can you please call the roll?
Miss Merriman,
Here?
Miss Yagaloff,
Present.
Mr. Gagnon,
Here.
Miss Hers,
Ms. Hers is dialing in by phone.
Yep, I'm here.
Thank you,
Mr.
Jennifer.
Mr. Weiner,
Here.
Miss Bleish,
Here.
Mr. Goldman,
Here.
Kayla Jaw,
Here.
Bridget Feeney.
Here.
Thank you. And Bridget, can you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, Bridget. All right. We have no revision to the agenda order, so we will begin with public communications. And just to start off, first of all, Happy New Year. This is very exciting for the first meeting of 2026, and you get me with a very lovely raspy voice because I'm coming off of a cold, so apologies for that. But leading into public communications, this is a time for the Board of Education to hear from the public, all of your thoughts, questions, concerns, and suggestions. And when you come to the podium, please give your name and town of residence. Each individual is allowed 3 minutes to speak, and please note that Imani will hold a yellow card when there is 1 minute remaining in your time and a red card when your time has expired. At that time, please conclude your remarks and respectfully take your seat. Please be aware that we are actively listening while you make your remarks. However, it is a Board of Education policy that we don't respond to comments as they are being made. We will begin with comments on agenda items, and in looking at the sign-up list, we don't have any, but I just want to list the agenda items. They are for this evening: adoption of the CIP 2026-2027, special education for West Hartford Public Schools, semi-annual restorative practices response report, approval of the financial report period ending November 30th, 2025, and approval of the minutes from the December 16th, 2025 Board of Ed meeting. Is there anyone who has any comments on agenda items that did not sign up? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to general comments. And we have one sign up here, Britt Killian.
Put on the general comment list. Good evening, my name is Britt Killian. I am a West Hartford resident and the parent of 2 Walcott students, a kindergartner and a 5th grader who is autistic. I'm speaking tonight both as a special needs parent and on behalf of the Special Education Parent-Teacher Organization, SEPTO. For those unfamiliar, SEPTO is just 1.5 years into its relaunch and full board transition. We now have 5 equal board members, over 125 members, and have hosted multiple events to support families across our community. In 2025, our focus was rebuilding, sharing SEPTO's mission, forming a partnership with People Services, and hosting events like the Anxious Generation Book Talk, a school year kickoff night, Miracle Leave Trick or Treat, and Transition Night. We also rallied at the state level around budget deficits and helped avoid significant cuts. This year, we've built on that momentum by adding an IEP workshop in partnership with CPAC, hosting Coffee and Connect events, and holding regular general meetings to share district updates and support families of children with IEPs, 504s, and other health or developmental needs. SEPTO has also gained a district-wide voice. We now have a seat on the Parent-Teacher Council and are working toward a dedicated SEPTO representative of every school's PTO. None of this would have happened without the early support of Melissa and Kelly during the 2023-2024 transition. They strongly encouraged the continuation of SEPTO, helped us grow membership, and connect with the right partners in town. Ahead of tonight's special education presentation, I want to sincerely thank Melissa and Kelly for their leadership, dedication, and transparency. I also invite the board to connect with SEPTO directly to learn more about our advocacy and our families. Our meetings and events are open to all. There are no dues or requirements, and we welcome the entire community. Supporting students with diverse learning needs is complex and deeply important work. It requires collaboration, creativity, and thoughtful balancing of limited resources. As both a parent and a SEPTO board member, I've seen the challenges and the rewards of inclusive and robust special education. The relationship between SEPTO and People Services is built on open communication, mutual respect, and a shared goal of helping every child reach their potential. Our administrators consistently make time to engage with families and work through difficult questions, and that makes a real difference. I hope the board, especially its newer members, will take time to engage with our People Services team, special education teachers, and paraprofessionals, observe special education classrooms and programs, and continue understanding why West Hartford is viewed as a leader in this area, while also identifying opportunities for growth and modernization. SEPTA looks forward to continuing our work with Kelly, Melissa, district administrators, the Board of Education, and the broader school community together in support of all learners. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other individuals who would like to make a public comment? All right. Moving on, we will turn to non-staff communications and reports when we get an opportunity to hear from our student representatives on all the exciting things happening at Hall and Conard. So who would like to kick us off? Kayla?
Okay, I'll
Thank you.
start. Good evening, everyone. I'm glad to be here again to share some updates from Hall. This week, Hall students began midterm exams, which will continue through Friday. The school is operating on a 2-hour delayed opening schedule due to the testing, which marks the conclusion of first semester courses, and the second semester will officially begin on Monday. Last Wednesday, Hall Principal Mrs. Isaacs held Titan Talks during lunch waves. This initiative gave students the opportunity to meet with her and discuss school-related concerns, ideas, and give positive feedback, which serves as a meaningful way to help communication between students and administration. Hall students also represented the school proudly in the community. At the 30th Annual West Hartford Martin Luther King Jr. celebration held here at the Town Hall, Hall student Nebel Bona shared reflections on Dr. King's legacy. The event also featured speeches and musical performances. Last Sunday, Hall students participated in the As School Match Wits academic quiz show competition, where they competed against Frontier Regional School. Looking ahead, on Wednesday, January 28th, parents of incoming 8th grade families will meet in the auditorium for Grade 8 Parent Night. In addition, next Friday, the 30th, Hall will hold a pep rally to promote school spirit. On the athletic side, winter sports are now in full swing. Hall and Conard boys hockey continues its season, while this Thursday, Hall will hold a Hall versus Conard boys basketball game. Hall wrestling also hosted an all-day tournament last Saturday, welcoming teams from across the region. In music, auditions are soon to take place for solisti and choralier ensembles. Pops and jazz rehearsals have begun, marking a busy and productive period for Hall music. Finally, in the performing arts, the theater department recently completed performances of Lord of the Flies, which was very well received and showed strong student dedication. And that is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla. Bridget?
First of all, I'd like to wish you a happy new year from Conard and let you know midterms are underway, but that hasn't stopped Conard students' busy lives. First up, a reminder that SAT Academy is coming. This academy provides test-taking strategies, practice questions, and support to help students feel confident on test day. Students who attended the academy increased their scores by an average of 50 points, which is a pretty big deal. So please be lookout on signups after break. Thank you to all the students who had a valuable opportunity to share their feedback and ideas during DEN discussions. And we are grateful and excited to keep hearing their thoughtful contributions and engagement. Big thank you goes out to Conard School Counseling and the National Honor Society as they hosted Cocoa and Cram on Wednesday, January 14th. We'd also like to give special shout outs to Holly Diodario, Heather Beatti DeWitt, and Megan Sersosimo for hosting. Up next for music and arts, Conard's music program will be performing their Pops concert on the 27th, and we are excited to see the talent of our different musical groups on the stage. Some select groups will also be hosting auditions for new members next year, so keep an eye out. A really exciting update from Conard. They're all exciting, but this one we were all very Our Amnesty International event. So thank you to President and Vice President of Amnesty International, Luke Kalki and Jacob Jackson, as students had the opportunity to engage in meaningful discussion about human rights issues and participate in a letter writing campaign advocating for global justice. Students were also given the opportunity to ask thoughtful questions and interact directly with Connecticut's own Senator Blumenthal. We received very positive feedback from the senator about Conard and to the impressive engagement of our students. Thank you as well to Michelle Pitkin, Kelly Casey, Megan Sasasimo, Jamie Gomez, and to Tim Reardon and the entire security team for their support in this event. Now it's time, because Valentine's Day is coming, people, and Conard students are getting ready to feel the love of the school community at our upcoming pep rally. This February 13th, students will cheer on unified basketball, spring sports, and see their friends participate in the Whitney Houston Challenge, the Pie in the Face contest, and, to be more general, school spirit. After a fun pep rally, students will then have the opportunity to dance the night away at Conard's Valentine's Day dance the same night. Thank you to Student Council for organizing, and we look forward to a great party. For winter sports, they're underway, and we want to congratulate all the achievements completed by winter athletes so far. Keep up the competitiveness and good teamwork. Some updates for next year's scheduling. Conard and Hall will be having a block scheduling panel for students on the 28th, which will be a great opportunity for students and staff to hear from a panel of the people currently participating in block scheduling. We are excited to see the different perspectives and can't wait to ask all of our questions. Make sure to keep an eye out for the senior class board, because we will be having a Chipotle fundraiser on February 2nd. If you want to support, and you should want to support, visit the Chipotle on New Britain Avenue February 2nd from 4 to 8 p.m. and place your order. Make sure to tell them that you're supporting the Conard fundraiser so we can get our percentage. And another important update, and my final update, is that Conard's mock trial team has moved on to the next round, and we will be competing again this February 6th. We will be rooting for them, as well as Hall, and we can't wait to see what they achieve. Thank you for listening to Conard's updates.
Thank you both. You are both such exceptional ambassadors for your schools, and you make me want to be a high school student again. So any questions from board members?
I just want to thank Bridget for noting that both Conard and Hall represented the West Hartford Public Schools very well in the Hartford region of the mock trial competition, and they advanced to the state playoff tournament, which, by the way, is no small feat, because this was the state's largest field in probably decades this year. So the fact that both Conard and Hall advanced is really a testament to how hard our students and teachers work. So thank you for being a part of it. I hope to see you in New Britain on Friday the 6th. And if I don't, good luck.
LaToya?
Yeah, and I want to add to y'all, yeah, the representation at the MLK event was just beautiful. The chorus and the speeches were so profound, and I think really left all of us really thinking a lot and engaging in some deep self-reflection and self-awareness. So thank you both so much, and thank you to both schools and all of the adults involved in helping to shape our young minds. It was a powerful event.
Thank you. Moving on to unfinished business. So we will be tonight revisiting the capital improvement plan, and I believe Julio Duarte and Bob Palmer will be joining us for any questions. And I am currently seeking a motion that the Board of Education adopt the capital improvement plan for the 2026-2027 year.
So moved.
Thank you, Jason.
I'll second that.
Thank you, John. Any discussion or question, any presentation you'd like to give, or?
I was just going to say at our last meeting, we introduced the capital improvement plan, which outlines funding for school maintenance, construction, equipment, and technology, and we provided a detailed breakdown of those categories. I again want to thank Bob and Barb for their support in that process. As a reminder, this 12-year plan serves as a roadmap for maintaining, repairing, and modernizing our school facilities in a strategic and responsible way, while also protecting the investment of our community. For the fiscal year of 26-27, the recommended appropriation is $14,890,000, and we are happy to answer any questions that the board may have before it votes.
And just to remind the board, this recommendation, this goes forward into the town's larger capital improvement plan for ultimate adoption.
Any questions? Ethan?
So the first question was, you said 14 million? The table shows 12. I was looking at this one.
Are you on, I think you might be on the wrong page. Go to
Page five.
page 5 of your board book.
Okay.
Do you see the top, top left, 26, 27?
Okay, I was looking at the wrong page. Yeah, I see. So if we can go back to page 2, though, for a minute. Heating and ventilation system, board adopted, final number, says $1 million. Yet when I look at the page, table 2, page 3, it's being postponed.
Yeah, I had mentioned that at the last meeting, the Webster Hill project, because of, we had to change the design of the HVAC system due to the industry changing, so we are postponed.
I have no problem with that. My question was more, board adopted $1 million, the final $1 million, but that's not how much we're gonna spend. So shouldn't it reflect the 0, or is that on page 5?
No, we still end up adopting, we still end up adopting that project, it's just postponed in timing. So the funds still remain in place for that project. And the funds in a capital project
no,
don't go away, they remain in
It's
place.
postponed for a future year.
Yes, well, it'll
Well-
still happen, but it's postponed for this time.
So will the debt that's taken on reflect it for this year?
No, no, the debt doesn't get, Barb probably can answer that better than me.
Sure. While the town does adopt the bond ordinance to allow for the town and the board to move forward, they don't actually issue the debt until the projects are underway.
Okay. The way I've always seen it is, the board adopted $1 million, the spending, there's something that shows the variance or what the spending will be. But this, it looks like, because, I'm just trying to understand.
So with a lot of the projects that Bob is doing, because they're transcending multiple fiscal years, we're very frequently, it's a benefit of the CIP program and the bonding process. So the town, they adopt the bond ordinance in advance of the project being started. And so that allows in the springtime for things to be going out to bid and so on and so forth. So it often straddles multiple fiscal years and is flexible in that way. So even though a project might have to be delayed, there might be another project that's become a priority, so.
I get all that, it's just I'm used to seeing the numbers where they're gonna come in. I don't know if there's another way this can be done, but, because to me, it's.
Yeah, I
I'm
think if I
maybe splitting
understand
hairs, but it,
more of a question relating to like financial examiners where you're looking at a budget versus this is basically a planned, and these are our plans, this is what we think it's going to cost, and the money itself is actually handled. I think all those variances across different accounts are actually in the town's budget, and what you're sort of approving is we're saying, hey, these are the relative projects that we're thinking about, the big projects, and the relative expected costs. Obviously, a lot of the costs are just rounded, it's $1 million, but
Yeah.
I'm sure
No, I
it's
got
not
that.
$1 million and change, but just so the town knows how much debt, if they were to approve all these, they might need to incur.
yeah, I mean, my assumption is there's gonna be times where you're not gonna be able to spend as much because of timing, like with Webster Hill. There'll be other ones where it's an emergency. and you
Yeah,
gotta-
I'm saying that variance is
I
under the
just-
purview of the town versus the board, I guess was what I was offering.
I guess in my comment is, would be good if we could reflect, this is what the current estimate is. It may go nowhere, but to me, that's just reporting effectively.
Well, what I'm hearing, correct me if
Well-
I'm wrong, Bob, the $1 million is the current estimate for what we would need to be able to progress with a project.
Yeah, and some projects we end up accruing for multiple years. So the school HVAC fresh air project is a good example of that. We annually ask from the town $5.54 million. We anticipate the project is probably going to cost more than that, so we accumulate a couple of years of adopted budget for that in order to execute that project. And that project takes several years to execute in itself, between the design, the bidding, the obtaining of the equipment, and then the final installation. It's a 3 to 4 year project, so it's done over multiple years.
I understand, I have no
Right.
problem with that conceptually.
Okay.
It's just the way, I don't know, reported.
And I should mention also, the town, since they're managing the capital improvement program, they are reporting it in their annual financial report. When they go out to bid, when they go out for debt, they're reporting an official statement, which is talking about the projects. So they have a lot of publications on their end because they're the ones overseeing the financials there.
Just if we're gonna vote on it, I don't know. I just wish there was a better way to do it.
Well, I think that the difference and the distinction is this is our plan, this is our priority, this is what we tell the town we think we need, this is how we'd like to prioritize it, what it would cost you. It's their budget, so I think everything that you're looking for would be on their side of the ledger.
I would just think we should reflect, this is what we expect to spend. It's just the finance background I'm used to, so I don't mean to derail this, but if it was something we could think of in the future. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, thank you, Jennifer. All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the motion passes. Thank you all. All right, now moving on to new business, we have none, so we'll move on to staff communications and reports, and we'll start off with the superintendent's report. Paul, over to you.
Thank you very much, and I will also say officially Happy New Year. I know we had the opportunity to have audience with most of you here at our board workshop, but first public meeting and regular meeting, or actually that was public also, our first regular meeting, so welcome back. A lot happened over the course of the month, so allow me to provide you some celebrations. Some thunder stolen on that Hall High Black Box Theater production of Lord of the Flies. It was truly excellent, and I just want to give a shout out to Catherine Hopkins, the theater director, the entire cast and crew, just great. We recently hosted this year's Spelling Bee. It was our 10th anniversary. It was bigger than better than ever. We had a packed house. Many students came out to support their peers and their friends. It was 15 rounds, 5 of which were head-to-head with the Grigos sisters from King Philip Middle School. It was 6th grader from KP's Team Ruby, Catherine Grigos, who is the West Hartford champion, and joining Kathleen at the State B on March 8th at the University of St. Joseph will be Bristow 6th grader Violet Long and Sedgwick Bobcat 6th grader Luis Rothert. All 6th grade school champions this year, which is quite impressive and I think leads to a real future for us, at least for the next few years. I want to thank all the ELA teachers who came out to support, the spellers, the middle school teachers for their commitment for this fun tradition. Special thanks to Tom and Amy who helped support this with the support of with Webster as well, library. So, Scholastic Art Award winners, I want to give congratulations to Connor Jr. L. Castillo and Senior Katie Miranda for taking home Scholastic Key Awards in fashion and photography categories respectively. Scholastic Key Awards are some of the oldest and most esteemed art award program in the country. And a super shout out to Jessica Fallis for her guidance and inspiration as their visual arts teacher. Another thanks and shout out to Luke and Jacob of the Amnesty International Club. The visit from Senator Blumenthal was great, but I needed to say that Luke and Jacob were, as students, were responsible for all the coordination with the senator, going through the mayor first and obtaining that. And so I was just very impressed by their follow through, their advocacy. It was a great turnout from the entire Amnesty International Club. It was a great set of questions that they asked. You also mentioned already MLK Day, but Nebel and Rowan Thompson from Conard, Nebel Bona from Hall, they were phenomenal. And as you said, Latoya, the music from whether it was the Hall Jazz Ensemble, the Conard Solo Choir, the King Philip Singers, just added just something indescribable. It was so good. Wolcott Elementary recently celebrated their semi-annual Culture Fest with an audience of greater than 400 in attendance. It was so impressive. They had more than 60 families who created booths showcasing their heritage, proudly sharing their traditions, their history, aspects of their culture, and most favoritely for me, the amazing food. It was just a fantastic night. I want to give kudos to Scott Dunn, the principal, and Darcy Melkor, teacher there, for their amazing coordination. Another shout out, National Council of Teachers of Math, President Latrenda Knighton recently joined the Charter Oak staff virtually to present our very own Alexa Freitas, 5th grade teacher at Charter Oak, with the 2025 NCTM Linking Research to Practice Outstanding Publication Award for her submission as a co-author in the article Developing the Right Reason in Kindergarten Mathematics, WRITE, W-R-I-T-E. It's about students at the earliest ages demonstrating their thinking through writing. I just a huge kudos on being recognized at such a high national level for her ability to combine research and pedagogy. Alexa, well done. Congratulations to Kathy Hardesty and the entire Whiting Lane 4th grade Math Quest team for their exceptional performance in the stock market competition, earning 1st and 2nd place among 40 teams statewide. We seem to just win that every year, and every year I say I'm going to go reach out to these kids and have them manage my portfolio, and I really need to do that one time. I shared in an email, but I wanted to announce publicly, more than 30 students from Conard, Hall, and Reach attended the Youth Empowerment Conference at Central Connecticut this year. While there, they engaged in conferences. They provided a conference, roundtable conversation on developing student-led initiatives. They helped support generating new ideas, and they built on existing efforts at the high school levels. One of many highlights was our own students from our Future Educators Diversity who facilitated a session to empower their peers to find their voice and strengthen their sense of agency. So a huge thank you to the club advisors, Alex Haravel, Elvira Casillas, Tamishi, I always kill Tamishi's last name, Hederachu, thank you, and Ben Norlin. Phenomenal teachers. I do actually know each of them, and they're just great. I also want to give a shout out to Bugby that recently celebrated its 75th anniversary, having first opened its doors in 1950. Will be treated by Susan Horvath, who's here, principal at Bugby currently, as part of a later presentation. But I'll share that Lloyd Bugby was a former principal at Hall High School, 2nd superintendent of the district, and he served with a tenure of 25 years. Bugby held a student-led school-wide assembly that featured student presentations on popular trends and Bugby history throughout the decades. And we had a special guest, Gail Ripass Stafford, who happens to be Principal Horvath's 3rd grade teacher, to provide reflections on their history. Obviously, you as a board know, and I'll just share for the sake of public comment, Webster Hill Elementary recently, this last week, had an outbreak of norovirus. I'm very happy to report that we did close school on Friday to arrest any spread. It's a highly contagious thing. And the school, not only Webster Hill, but all of our schools, we just, for the sake of safety and to ensure that things were going to be clear for us over the long weekend, did a deep cleaning thanks to Bob Palmer, the entire plant services team, and no issues to report this week currently. A couple of questions had been recently asked. We just approved the CIP to go forward. I've been talking to you guys about the DRIP program, the District Repair and Improvement Program. It's a new grant from the state of Connecticut. The state just recently approved that through bonding, so we expect that we'll have paperwork in place and be able to apply against that grant very soon this year, and we'll report that out to you through financial examiners. Likewise, we've talked a little bit about, and you've read about, the Special Education Expansion and Development SEED grant, which is a new grant this year. for expansion of special education programs. We have received the amount of our entitlement, but the state is just putting the final touches on the grant application. We expect that to be out, and we do already have projects that we would apply against that once the state finalizes that and we can access those funds. And again, we will provide you with updates about that through our financial examiners meeting. I did want to ask you guys asked a question last time that we were here in the closing moments of our meeting. You asked about how schools respond when there's instances of charged language, specifically things that could be characterized as hate speech, racial slurs, or slurs that really are directed toward an element of a person's identity, whether it's their religion, their cultural heritage, anything of that nature. And as you know, hate speech has absolutely no place in our schools, whether it's targeting an individual or a group, or whether it's directed to a person, or whether it's just simply used in someone's very unfortunate casual speech. It simply has no place. And when incidents are reported, our administrators do follow a protocol. That includes interviewing the victim, any relevant witnesses, the offenders when known. We will always make contact with all families involved. We will explore openness to restorative conversations and conduct caregiver follow-up with families. When circumstances, certainly circumstances vary often in terms of the intensity of the impact. Regardless of that impact, instances of hate speech are considered a serious offense, and offenders can generally face suspension as well as required educational components. Communication always involves families directly involved to include witnesses to the events, and in the instances where a perpetrator is unknown or if the event is very public, there may be class, grade level, or school or even district level communication regarding the behavior and its incongruence with our values, some description of our response and the supports available to the larger community. And you may have likely, as parents, seen some of that communication in the past with those events. The district also has a charged language protocol that we use whenever there are curricular intersections with charged language that might occur in literary or historical settings. And you have a number of relevant policies relating to hate speech under Policy 1800, our Educational Equity Policy, Policy 5320, Student Discipline, Suspension, and Expulsion, that identifies protected classes, as well as connections to our School Climate and Restorative Practices Policy, which have recently been revised, renewed, and passed, and will be discussed a little bit here. So I share all that tonight, not to signal any dramatic issue that is requiring public attention, just really in response to questions that were raised at the last board meeting. I did want to share, we do have a presentation tonight, and tonight's presentation is intended to, when we passed the new policies, new statewide policies on school climate, the board specifically asked that we report out on behaviors twice per year. So this is our mid-year report. We will have a follow-up report that will occur in the spring, likely if not the last board meeting of the year, then close to the last. And separately from that, we also have, we have a little bit, because the new statewide school climate policy does reference restorative practice. We have a little mentioning of restorative practices that occurs tonight, but we have a longer presentation on our work with restorative practices that's scheduled for February. A couple of more, sorry, this is a longer update, I apologize, but under the heading of curriculum and professional development, we had a great meeting the other day, and I want to give a shout out to Ann McKernan, as well as Greg Priest, our fire chief. We have a new emergency medical technician course, EMT, as opposed to our previous EMR, emergency medical response. Colin Connard and Hall will both offer this newly revised emergency medical technician course as an early college experience, a UConn ECE course to prepare students for the National Registry of Emergency Medical Technicians certification. The course itself is co-taught by a West Hartford Fire Department instructor. Very, very exciting. AP Honor Roll, both Conard and Hall have earned distinction as 2025 AP Honor Roll schools. The AP Honor Roll recognizes schools that have done outstanding work to welcome more students into AP courses and support them on a path towards college success. So just great things happening there. And then in general, I did want to mention the SEPTO, and very glad to hear a little more about SEPTO this evening. They have in conjunction with our Pupil Services Department, they're offering a transition night this Wednesday, January the 21st at 7 p.m. at King Philip Middle School. Transition night's an opportunity for parents and caregivers of children transitioning across levels, i.e. kindergarten, moving into kindergarten, moving up from elementary to middle and into high school, or from high school into post-secondary, to gain valuable information about transition activities and make connections with their future school teams. We also have our annual Welcome to Kindergarten informational meeting for parents and guardians of children who will turn 5 by September 1st, 2026. Who are eligible for the 26-27 kindergarten class. That meeting will be held on Monday, January the 26th at 6:15. Don't recall if this was mentioned, but the second annual West Hartford Youth Leadership Academy is taking place on January 29th. It's hosted by the West Hartford Prevention Partnership. It's a full-day academy offering engaging training and hands-on activities designed to educate and empower students in a variety of areas. West Hartford Public Schools is very proud to partner with the Prevention Partnership in support of this event. And last but not least, the Bridge Charity Ball takes place on January the 31st, and hope to see you there. That is my update for this evening, pending any immediate questions.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions? LaToya?
No questions. Mine is a comment. I feel a little nervous about what I'm about to say, but it just has to be said. And yeah, I just thank you for what you shared about hate language and how the district is handling it. I'm gonna take my time. I think that this is beyond the school district's responsibility. I want to say here on this public platform that we as a community and we as parents need to really think about the messages that we're giving our kids. The rise in anti-Semitism, anti-Black, homophobic language in our schools is a direct reflection of what's happening in our society. Differently abled kids, all of that, anti-fat language, all of it is a direct reflection of our society. And our kids are just going and they're repeating it. And so I think the call to action for our community, for our families, is we need to be having these conversations at home. We need to be talking to our kids about literally being kind. You don't have to have the same political views to honor someone's dignity and humanity. And so, while I appreciate what our district is doing, our district needs help. We're raising the kids. We're sending them in the buildings. We're giving them the messages. We're controlling, they have cell phones, but we're the parents. And so we need to really be mindful about the messages that we're perpetuating in our households. Because our kids are going into schools, they're the next generation, they're our next leaders, our next elected officials at this table, right? We can't be teaching them to hate people. We can't be teaching them division is okay. I'm a Black woman in America, 400 plus years. I got a lot of reasons to be angry. But I can't perpetuate that in my household. I can't tell my daughter to go to school and be angry as a Black person and be mad at everyone. No, that's not the way, right? We got to stand together. This is a big moment for our country. And while we can be upset about what's happening at the national level, what's happening worldwide, we got to be thinking about what's happening right here in West Hartford, Connecticut, and how we're perpetuating it. What are the intentions behind what we say and what we do? Is it rooted in love? Is it rooted in unity, community, wanting to gain a willingness to understand people? And so I want to offer that tonight, that the struggle that we're seeing in our schools is not unique to West Hartford. It's happening all over the state of Connecticut, all over the country. We're seeing an increase in hate speech, and it's because of adults. It's adults, y'all. We need to check ourselves. And so I hope that resonates with people tonight. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, LaToya. John?
I'll defer my question.
Miriam?
Thank you. Just a comment also that I appreciate LaToya's passion and the concern, and I think that we here, sitting here, to be focused on what we can control as well, and that is to ensure that while our district is in charge of student achievement and school climate and other policies, that while they're here physically, that we ensure their protection when it comes to hate speech, and that we have the policies and we have the education to support and ensure exactly what you're saying, that our students and our teachers can be supported when things arise, and that they have education as needed, which I think is critical, that we continue to be up to date with a variety of education to ensure that our students are safe while they're here, while they're in our purview. And that's our charge, I think, as a board, to ensure that we have policies in place to ensure that our values are upheld and that our students are safe, and so that ultimately they can be as successful as possible and reach their potential.
So I think we're kind of landing in the same place, I would like to think, and that I do think that the district has done a lot to advance. I mean, we are very consistent in those policies, and I think we need to continue to revisit them, but they are holding firm on an alignment with the values we possess as a district, and they're being kind of enforced and supported accordingly. But that doesn't prevent things from happening regardless because of outside forces. So I think it's something we're just going to continue to contend with. But I see a lot of attention being paid in West Hartford and feel very comforted by that, and feel like we're a model for, I hope, the rest of the state and the country. But we can always do better.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree, and we're always learning, and there's always more work to do, unfortunately. But I appreciate both comments. Thank you.
I think as our former chair would have said, it's a yes and.
A both and. Well, thank you, Paul. Moving on to staff reports and board discussion. I'm very excited to welcome up Melissa Caballero and Mrs. Kelly Brouse to report out on special education in West Hartford Public Schools, and I understand they will be joined by some special guests.
Absolutely. As they make their way to the table, I'll make some quick introductions to the members of my team. You are all very familiar with Melissa Caballero, who is our Executive Director of Pupil Services. I don't know if the new board has had the pleasure to meet Ms. Kelly Brouse. She is our Assistant Director of Pupil Services, and I know that they have brought some wonderful guests and some excellent advocates from our post-secondary program, and I will let Melissa and Kelly do the honors to introduce them, but I'm very thankful for this team, and I don't know if I could give sort of a better acknowledgement than the one that they received earlier for the work that they do in the support of our programs and our children and our families. So with that, as they power up, I'll turn it over to the team.
Very good. Well, good evening. We're so grateful to have this opportunity to present to you tonight on Pupil Services. I'm Melissa Caballero. We've not had an opportunity to meet with the board yet, but I'm very pleased to be able to have this opportunity to address you this evening. I'd like to welcome our newest team member. So nice to see you. We are very fortunate this evening to be joined by my outstanding colleague, Mrs. Kelly Brouse. And we have three very important guests that are joining us for the presentation today. Would you guys feel comfortable saying your name? Maybe I'll start with Quinn.
Hi, my name is Quinn.
Can you say that again?
Hi, my name is Quinn.
My name is Vi. My name is Sarah.
So we're very fortunate to have these special guests with us tonight. They're members of our post-secondary transition program. And so in tonight's presentation, Mrs. Brouse and I are going to give you an overview, high-level overview of the laws and our programming. And because it is a school night, we would just ask that the beginning part of the presentation until we get to the program that you just hold any questions. We'll have an opportunity for the students to share about the post-secondary program. And once they're done sharing and you have an opportunity to talk to them a little bit, we'll let them go because they have very important work to do tomorrow at school. And we can answer any questions that you have up until that point before we continue on with our presentation, if that's all right with everybody. But very pleased to be able to present to you tonight. And so as a matter of course, in West Hartford, oh, is it not presenting? I'm going to keep talking. In West Hartford Pupil Services, we always follow all state and federal mandates. We have our own internal systems of monitoring, but we really are overseen by the Connecticut State Department of Education, Bureau of Special Education, and they actually have key indicators that they look at, and they produce an annual report every year that looks at those key indicators. In West Hartford, I'm happy to report that report just came out, and we are at the highest level of meets expectations in all of those key areas. I always like to start and ground ourselves in the law that guides this work about the protections that are in place for students with disabilities. And, we're very fortunate. I think a lot of people think this has been a long-standing provision of supports for students and individuals with disabilities. But I would say that this is a relatively newer law. It's only 50 years old. And it really came to be in 1975, so literally last year was its 50th birthday, when they had the Education for All Handicapped Children Act was first passed. And around that same time, that's when Section 504 was passed. And there were some great documentaries like Crip Camp. If you're not familiar with that, I highly recommend you watch that, because the people who advocated for rights of students and individuals with disabilities are still living, and they are still actively engaged in that advocacy work. And it's really neat to be able to learn from them. And so, those protections under IDEA really came into effect in the 70s, and it's been revised a couple of times, but there are three guiding principles under that law that really guide our work. And the first is Child Find. Child Find is our district's responsibility to identify, evaluate, and locate those individuals with suspected disabilities so that we can ensure they're receiving those services. It's also to provide them with free and appropriate education. You'll hear people use the term FAPE, and that just means that all students, whatever their learning style is, that they're guaranteed that same free and appropriate education, just like their non-disabled peers. And in this law, it really stipulates that all school districts must ensure that to the maximum extent possible that students with disabilities are educated with their non-disabled peers. And so in West Hartford, we engage in that process all the time. But in addition to this law, our state legislature has legislative session happens every summer, and key changes can be made at the federal level governing our work or at the state level. And our responsibility is always to be monitoring any changes that come out. So, for example, a couple of years ago, 2023, they changed the age in which students can be educated in the public schools. And so that changed from being they exited on their 22nd birthday to providing them the full year, which they're 22. So they will stay with us the full year, which we are very happy about to keep our students. And it gives them the opportunity to be exiting at the same time as a graduation, and then entering the workforce or following their career aspirations at that time. But it really provides more continuity. And also this summer, they changed the age for developmental delay. So it used to be that by a child's 6th birthday, we had to make a mandation change, but now it's moved to the age of 8. So we are just responsive to whatever occurs in the legislative session. So we're always monitoring that and making sure that we as a district are being responsive. And how might somebody be found eligible for special education? So parents and or school team members, if they have an area of concern or a question about suspected disability, they can make a referral to the school-based team. Once a referral is made, a planning and placement team meeting is held, and that's called a PPT. And related service providers, special education teachers, administrators, whoever's deemed relevant for that referral will be included in that meeting. And the purpose of that meeting is to discuss the student's data, what questions and concerns do they have, and they might plan at that time a comprehensive evaluation if they believe there might be an area of suspected disability. And I listed some of the disability, well, all of the disability categories up here for you. So they would design the evaluation to kind of target those areas. When a referral is made, it starts a clock for us. In the state of Connecticut, it's a 45-day clock. So our teams have 45 days from the date of referral to go to PPT, get this signed consent for evaluation, complete those evaluations, and come back to PPT, and also, if eligible, implement that IEP. So it is 45 days seems like a short timeline, but it goes by really fast because we're holding meetings in the interim. Once a PPT does do evaluations, we reconvene again to look at those evaluation reports and determine if a student's eligible under one of these categories. I think it's important to note that something specific to Connecticut is specific learning disabilities dyslexia. Not all states in the United States identify dyslexia as its own independent category for disability, and that is something that's unique to us, to the state of Connecticut. And once a student is found eligible, if we deem them eligible, then parents do need to sign consent. So until they sign consent, we don't do anything. So parents have to provide express consent that they would like their child to receive special education services. And if a parent is to sign consent, it's at that time that we would develop an individualized education plan. An individualized education plan is a legal document that ensures the student's needs are being met. It talks about their current present levels of performance. It identifies very specific goals and objectives that we'll be addressing. And it talks about very specific things like the services that they might be receiving, such as special education services, related services, the frequency, the location, and who might be delivering those services, amongst many other things. It is a living, breathing document, so we're required to meet annually at minimum. That's called an annual review. And every 3 years, we redo that initial evaluation to redetermine eligibility to make sure students are still eligible. And but if a parent has a question or concern across any point in the year, or the team deems that we might need to revise the IEP in some way, we can call a PPT meeting to revise that IEP at any point in time. And we really encourage our teams to do that because students change all of the time. And if we wrote a goal or objective that's mastered really early and we want to change the rigor or modify something, we can do that at any point during the school year. And we do that quite frequently as a practice in our schools. And now that I've had a chance to talk to you about the laws that govern our work, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly, who is going to talk to us a little bit about the students that we have the privilege to serve and our team members doing the work.
Great, thank you. So, of course, our favorite thing to talk about and why we're all here are our students. And so as you look at the numbers up on the screen, you know, it's certainly, we have a large majority of our West Hartford population receive services in some capacity under special education. When you're looking, we pulled these numbers in your board report, I think it says January 9th. That can change. Students move out, students move in, students are found eligible. Melissa just talked about the process. So those numbers do fluctuate. But what we really want you to understand is what those numbers mean and who our children are. So we're going to talk about programming tonight, but those 1,905 students here, you know, you can see about 1,650 around there are in our schools, in our West Hartford schools. As you walk the halls, they're in our pre-K, they're in our post-secondary program. They're receiving all different sorts of services, whether it's for a speech impairment or a hearing loss need, or different more wraparound services, maybe academics. We, you know, work closely, and we're going to talk about what those programs look like tonight, as well as the people who service them. But it's really important for you to understand that as a public school district here in Connecticut, we have a responsibility to other students as well. And so part of the decisions we make and where your budget money goes is to these students as well, which we find very important. So any student that resides in West Hartford but attends a magnet school or a charter school and requires an IEP is a student that we are considered their nexus for. So we have an administrator and a case manager who monitor their programming, work with the school team of the magnet school and the family, and follow our same protocols, our same timelines, and use, those conversations look very similar when we're at PPT, and those students are part of this number. Additionally, we'll talk more a little bit later, but we do have students, as we talk about our continuum of services, who might need a higher level of care and a higher level of service that might not be provided in our in-district programming. So we do have students who access what's called APSEPs. Those are approved private special education programs. Those are schools around the state and some out of state that are approved by Connecticut because of the services and the quality that they provide. And we partner with families to determine a right fit if that's the need. And then we have a department supervisor, Laura Endell, and she directly oversees each of those student cases and their programs. We visit collectively, Melissa, Laura, and myself. Often we'll bring a BCBA or another staff to really make sure that that student, who's ours, is getting everything that they can, even though they're not in our walls. And the last thing that I want to make sure you understand is also within West Hartford, the geographic region, if there's a private school that resides in West Hartford, if a student that attends that private school and it qualifies for a nonprofit status, if they require some level of service, so they won't receive an IEP, but they'll receive an ISP, an individualized service plan. And so we have a department supervisor, Ms. Piscatello, who supports the post-secondary and STIVE program. She also supports our private schools. So it's important for you to understand our legal obligation to students who may not be within our West Hartford public schools that you visit, but are part of the students that we care about and we oversee, and we make sure that they're getting the very best. As described, our obligation begins at age 3, so we have students in the community, children in the community who come and they might just come for testing, they might come to one of our programs, and then all the way through, that's 22nd year of age. So it's a wide range of students, and we are thrilled, and every single one of them deserves nothing but our best, and they all come with their own unique profile and unique exceptionalities in the best ways that we get to support them. So as we talk about our leadership team, you may remember that a couple years ago we had a bit of a restructure. So of course, Melissa is our executive director. She has shepherded us through the changes that we've seen the past couple years, and she continues to impress us all. And as the introduction of my position a couple years ago, the assistant director came into be, I think as we've gone through our couple years together, the thing that everybody agrees on is nobody can believe how Melissa did it on her own. So she's exceptional, and we're so grateful for her leadership. But with the change and the addition of my role to really support all of the responsibilities of the executive director for district oversight, we've also introduced a level of administration at every school. And there's great intention behind that, and it was a very creative effort to make sure that it was not at a major cost to the district. As you'll remember, elementary schools had principals and curriculum specialists as their leadership team, which was really a one administrator team. So, and then we also had department supervisors. We had 6 department supervisors, maybe 7 department supervisors, and their responsibility was to go to every school in the district. So they might have had 5 or 6 schools just for themselves that they visited over the course of the week and supported the pupil service teams of teachers with making decisions and PPTs, all of that. So understandably, these exceptional people in the department supervisor role could not necessarily see the student day to day, support the teams, throughout the hallways as things were coming up and giving advice and really overseeing that fidelity of service. So with this shift, moving the curriculum specialists who were teacher leaders, changing that into an assistant principal role, not only did we increase the leadership that was at the elementary schools, we increased the leadership at the secondary schools as well. So the elementary assistant principals have the responsibility of overseeing pupil services. So they attend all PPTs, they support their teams directly. Their special education teacher teams have them in the building all the time to ask any questions, talk about what's going on for a student. And in the same way, the students have them all the time. The assistant principals know the kids, they know the families, they know the intricacies of the programming and what's working and what images they're gonna like if they get a sticker as a reward, all the good stuff. And then in the same vein, the secondary schools, our department supervisors are now dedicated really to a secondary building, which is obviously much larger than an elementary school. So they join those leadership teams with that pupil services lens. And really what we've seen overall, and it's only been, we're in year 2 of this change, so we're going to be tracking long-term because we have aspirations that it's going to help us in many ways as a district. But I think what we've seen is that conversations around what happens for kids, are about the day-to-day of what is really going to help them grow skills and grow independence. And there's just a trust that you can't always get if you're doing your best by going, building to building every day. So we're really excited about this change. And as I mentioned, our pupil service supervisors, we have one dedicated to the Early Learning Center, which is at Whiting Lane and Aiken, we'll talk about in a minute, the out of districts, and all of our programs as well. And then the magic makers are not us, they're our teachers, right? And they are making incredible things happen for our students. They are creative, they are dedicated, they are calling at night to tell us about things that they're thinking in reflection that they want to change for a student the next day. They are just so impressive, and that is what our work is really all about. So as you can see, we really are a constellation of services here in West Hartford. We have both direct academic instruction through our special education teachers. We also have services for speech and language needs. We have the clinical consortium of services, and then we have board certified behavior analysts. So those are BCBAs that visit the schools and work with teams to support student planning and really support independence and oversee some of our adult support staff. And then we have all of our related services as well. So students might need gross or fine motor needs. They're all working on their own skills that are yet to be developed and will be developed, and we ensure that we have a wide range of services to support whatever those needs are. I do want to point out a couple special positions in the district. We have teachers of the deaf and hard of hearing. We love being a destination district for folks that may be part of the deaf community, and that's because of the history here in West Hartford. And we have an incredible team that really ensures access for all and inclusion for all in that community. We have an assistive technology specialist who is actually a consultant for all of our schools and all of our programs, and even out of districts at times. So she's pretty spectacular. She's all over the place, and she's ensuring students have access to any type of technology that's going to promote their learning, promote their ability to share what they can do. So that's a really neat thing that we do as well. We have transition coordinators to support our transition legislation that starts at age 14. One primarily dedicated to the high schools who works on vocational skills, supporting students with accessing jobs in the community, supporting next steps. And then we have one primarily dedicated to post-secondary work, supporting transition into adulthood, and working with students in a myriad of ways, whether it's accessing a college campus or seeking out, a vocational area of expertise for them. And then I really want to highlight that our nurses, who are amazing, and certainly every time of year, but especially this time of year, they are also part of our pupil services team. So it's important for you to understand kind of how our team is comprised and all that our budget touches as well, including a nursing supervisor. So that's our team. And what those people will probably tell you is the magic makers are our adult support staff, because we know that there are students who may need a higher level of support, whether it's with actual direct instruction or support of a behavior plan, or data collection around a student's needs so that we can make good decisions as a team for that child, and that comes from our adult support staff. We've been working really hard with our administrators, our pupil service teacher teams, and also our BCBAs on how to provide additional training to really build capacity with these folks, because we know they are with our children day in and day out, hour in and hour out, really boots on the ground, making sure they get what they need and the fidelity of services. So can't thank this team enough either. The paraeducators, student aides, we got to change that for and registered behavior technicians are a different level of certification. They're overseen by the BCBAs, and they can provide additional support primarily around data collection and analysis to really drive good programming that's meaningful for students. We also have sign language facilitators and interpreters, 2 different levels of communication access based on student needs, and certainly these numbers are really just a reflection of student needs. So what's important to know about staffing in general is that we intermittently over the course of the year really track our student cohorts and our student needs and their programming, and that is a reflection of how we staff the buildings year in and year out, and that may change over the course of the year as well. So you know, there's never a set amount of staff and we just have to make do. It's really a reflection of what our students need, the programming that needs to be provided to them, and we trust our teams to be judicious in their decisions around that because we're always trying to promote the least restrictive environment for our students and the most independence possible long term. So just good things to know. All right, so the next piece, I'll get us started with this and then Melissa will finish us off. We're going to talk about our continuum of services. Now, this is the fun stuff, right? This is what we actually are doing for our kids right here in West Hartford, and it's just so impressive when you really see at the table with the kids what's happening for our children. So all schools across the district, you know, have different models of delivering academic instruction for students who have IEPs. So that's a specialized type of instruction based on a need. And that could be the resource model. That's where students might get pulled out of class. It could also look like a push-in. So sometimes when students, and perhaps at the younger ages, when they're trying to generalize a skill or also work on peer interaction at the same time, or you know, for a variety of reasons, that push-in model might make sense. We have a co-taught model where you might see a general education classroom with a special education teacher as a team teacher. So that expectation is that there's really 2 teachers in the class and they're responsible for all the children in the room and the content, but that special education teacher is keeping that lens on what a child might need in a specialized instruction model so that they can access the general ed classroom. And then we also have consultation model. So some students may not need that direct and explicit instruction, but their general ed teacher is going to benefit from consulting with their case manager to understand how to modify a text or what accommodations are going to be appropriate. So again, as you're hearing us talk, the least restrictive model is our goal, but we know that students need all sorts of things and at all different times of their life too. You know, there's never one program that's just going to be it for a child because they're humans and they grow and they're amazing. So we change with them, and so we have all of these options available to our students. So talking about some of our more intensive programs, we have a continuum of services that go from, like I said, least restrictive to more intensive. And then we'll talk about out of districts as well, which are, you know, more restrictive in nature because they don't have access to the general education population. So starting with our youngest learners, we have pre-K rooms across many schools, but our early learning centers at Whiting Lane and Aiken are NIAC accredited programs where there's an integrated approach to providing intensive services alongside general education peers, and it's just a beautiful young learning program for ages 3 and 4 with a dedicated supervisor, as I talked about. And it does have the continuum of services that you saw, whether it's related services like OT and PT or anything that's needed can be provided there. As students matriculate up to our kindergarten, we have created really, I will say, hubs of support, knowing that we have 11 elementary schools. We've dedicated certain schools to have more inclusive programs that can provide more intensive services where the case manager, that pupil services teacher, might have a smaller caseload because their students have more higher levels of need or hours of support or services that they might need. So those intensive academic programs service our students. We actually have 13 elementary intensive academic programs right now across 5 schools. And they range, you know, because every child's different, but they receive, you know, throughout the day, ABA therapy services, you know, integrated into their approach. They might have discrete trial instruction. You know, it's a range of things, and they can have co-treats, which is when, you know, a speech pathologist might come in with a social worker or a psychologist and do a session together so that the services are being addressed together for a child to really generalize and again, get back to that goal of independence. So we meet students where they are. Again, no program is just what the child is going to receive until they graduate. Every year, and oftentimes far more frequently than that, teams are coming together around the table to talk about how the child's doing, what the team can do in response and proactively. And certainly there are students who we see move from an intensive program to a resource model, and vice versa as well. So we're always kind of trying to figure out what's best for children. With that intensive academic program that we have, it does go up through the middle school. So all 3 middle schools have intensive academic rooms that provide similar services. Again, the goal is to ensure students are getting high levels of care and service delivery while still accessing general ed courses and peers as much as possible and as much as appropriate. And that can be a reverse model. It can be, students pushing or support pushing in with a student. But really, it's constantly trying to keep the doors open for students and never closing any potential pathways down the road, because we know in all veins of our conversation, we don't close doors and we create opportunities. So, that's a goal certainly in pupil services as well. And then Conard and High also has further, carries on the intensive academic services throughout and builds in vocational work as well. And then on the other side of things, sometimes it's not the academics that cause challenge for students, it's that regulation and their social emotional learning and their reciprocity with peers. So when students are really showing us through their behaviors that they're having some lagging skills in those areas, we have learning centers at 2 of our elementary schools for an intensive behavior program. And really it follows the same model. The goal is to provide a smaller environment where students can access that as needed to learn how to, access their regulation strategies and the things that might not come as naturally when they're feeling uncomfortable or dysregulated in the larger classroom, get their curriculum so that if they have to leave a general ed classroom because they're, let's say, overwhelmed, that doesn't mean they have to miss all of that instruction either. So that's a key core component to this, is that we don't want a lagging skill in their, emotional development to get in the way of their academic growth. So these programs work very collaboratively, just like I described in the intensive academic programs. They have I wouldn't say higher level, because certainly there's a need in the intensive academic, but they work very closely with the clinicians, so that often they're having the clinicians more frequently in their classrooms, providing maybe daily morning meetings where they're working on a specific skill over the course of the week. Recently, I was visiting one of the classrooms at Morley, and the students were actually reflecting on their days and talking about how they felt, and they were creating kind of this beautiful, pixelated picture of the month of January based on how they were feeling, and having those open conversations. And I think, there's so many things we can do as parents for our kids, but also normalizing that being human means having different emotions is one that we should also be normalizing for our kids, because sometimes it can be very tricky when you feel stigmatized for just having a natural response. So, that's something that gets worked on in our learning centers. Those programs carry through at our 2 larger middle schools, Sedgwick and KP, and then you'll hear in a minute about our focused program Strive at the high school. And that's where Ms. Piscatello oversees it. It's a smaller environment for students who, we've really heard from our students who have accessed the Strive program after being in a main campus, just how much more confident they felt in accessing their instruction and their learning. It's a fully credit-bearing program. It's less than 40 students at Strive, so it is off-site, and it just provides those wraparound services where students can access their core instruction. If they have if it works for them to go back to a main campus and access courses there, the teams can work together to provide access to their after-school activities. So it's a fantastic program that really carries through the level of support. And again, it's all about that continuum. What is more restrictive but more appropriate for a student? And when we say more restrictive, we just mean not in the general education environment as much, because that's certainly the goal, and we're always looking for opportunities to grow that for our children. Heard enough of me?
You did a great job. And going on with our programs, there's more. We have a school engagement program that was started a little under 10 years ago. It was originally a program started off-site in response to student engagement trends. So this was pre-COVID, where we really noticed that there were students who were struggling to get into the high schools, and it might be because of anxiety, feelings of overwhelm, and we were really trying to respond to what the current need was. And the good news story there was that the school engagement program was highly effective, included a clinician, special education teachers, and a low student-to-teacher ratio, but it was off-site. And what we saw is students were coming to school, and we were so happy that we were able to break down that barrier, but we weren't seeing, with the STRIDE program, we see students matriculating back to their home high school, but because it was off-site and they were doing so well, there wasn't really a lot of interest to go back to their home school. And so a couple of years ago, we moved it back to the home school. So there are 2 school engagement programs, one at Hall and one at Conard. They both have a full-time clinician and a special education teacher and tutors that work in the room. And it allows for students to enter into a very quiet, calm, therapeutic setting and access their school day as appropriate. We try to be very proactive and engage with students who might be showing levels of disengagement so that we can work with them on coping skills and support, so that if they're starting to show those trends, we might be able to intervene sooner. And it has been very successful, and we've seen a lot of our students graduating mostly on time, which is a huge change from the trends that we were seeing when the program was off-site. And so we were very fortunate this year that we've partnered with Effective School Solutions. They're a separate entity, and they received their own grant, and they called us and said, we've received this grant and we need a school district to partner with, and they've partnered with us in the past very successfully. And so they essentially gifted us that grant. And so they're working with us at Bristow and King Philip Middle School to downstream some of our efforts for school engagement. And we've been very pleased with the outcomes that we've seen at those 2 schools this year. And those schools were picked based on their chronic absenteeism data. And so we've been so happy with that partnership this year. There is a possible potential that their grant might extend partial funding into next year. And so Paul and I have been meeting with them, but we've been so fortunate to have that and intervene sooner, so before kids are getting to high school, and provide them with those coping skills, strategies, and confidence, so that as they go into the comprehensive high schools, they're feeling supported. In addition to that, we have a fabulous post-secondary transition program, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that before we ask our students to share. But our post-secondary transition program services students ages 18 through 22 all the way through the end of their 22nd year. We have 2 locations. We have 2 classrooms located here at Town Hall and others located on the Cogswell campus. And the program is really for students who've fully met their high school graduation requirements and need transition-only skills, working on activities of daily living, vocational support, and independent living skills. We're fortunate to say that in addition to fabulous teachers and a transition coordinator, we also have a culinary coordinator who has a full culinary kitchen, and our students bake delicious treats. And we're very fortunate at Town Hall because there's a Town Hall Perks cart that comes on Fridays. So if you're ever in the mood, please stop by. It is the highlight of everybody's day. And if they're running late, I get lots of calls. But they bake the most delicious treats, and they actually partner with Nero Cafe, who provides the coffee every week, which is just wonderful. But I'm telling you, there are certain things that if you weren't one of the first offices, all the treats are sold out of certain hot items, but really delicious. And in addition to that, we have our own vocational site that you might have heard of, the Next Chapter Bookstore. That was open in 2021 in response to the need after the COVID pandemic. A lot of our partners in the community that we rely on heavily for vocational training were practicing, distancing standards. They were allowing less people into the workplace. And so we opened our Next Chapter Bookstore, and it's been open since then very successfully. And I'm going to let the students tell you a little bit more about that, but we're so happy to have our 3 students here tonight, and I thought it would be nice if you started by sharing what the post-secondary program means to you. If you could think about that. Do you want to go first? Sure. Just push the button before you talk.
My name is Vi, and for me, the post-secondary program, it means a lot of things. I definitely think that it is a place to grow with confidence and just develop a lot of skills, as well as a community. I think I look forward to coming every day and, seeing my classmates and working with the job coaches and the teachers and going out in the community, and definitely become a lot more confident in doing things independently. So.
This is my second year at post-secondary, and I think that I improved a lot going through first semester to now. just like I learned how to like take the bus like independently. There's all different. One of amazing why this town is amazing is because of these buses to go around, and it's been amazing just like going independently on that. I love looking at the bookstore. It's amazing. It's a great opportunity to talk to like customers and be on the register and kind of deal with money. And speaking of money, we go on a community trip, and we kind of learn how to like do budgeting and try to track your money, and I thought that was very helpful.
And on Sarah's behalf, she's asked me to share her answers, and I think it sums it up just perfectly. Post-secondary means to her that it's her community. It certainly is.
Maybe you guys could share a little bit about, we have great community partners. What are some of the places that you've worked, and a little bit about each of those jobs?
I can start if you want. So I'm a part of, I think, 4 different job sites. 2 of them are based in the program. So as mentioned earlier, the Next Chapter bookstore, probably my favorite. I help with managing the social media. There's a used bookstore if you're not familiar. So we have students that, like I personally come in the store and work, and I know that I have classmates that do things like book sorting at the Cogswell campus and things like that. I like interacting with the customers, and it's also cool to sort through the books, see like what people donate. It's a great community aspect. I'm also involved in the culinary program, as Ms. Caballero mentioned. So on Thursdays, I go with a few other students to Cogswell, and we work in the kitchen, and we create things for the coffee cart. We work on following recipes, measuring ingredients, doing the conversions. We package everything. We practice cleaning the kitchen, mopping, sweeping, things like that. Then I'm also involved with Our Farm has a preschool program where they partner with a school in Bloomfield, and they have different classes come every week to the farm and participate in lessons. I do that one independently. So most job sites, I have a job coach, but some of them I go on my own. And then the 4th one that I'm a part of is actually the Wedding Lane ELC. And it's really cool to be a part of that and to see students that will probably be in this program one day, even when they're 4 and 5. And I like playing with the kids and just learning a lot from, there's a lot of paras they're very helpful, and they show me a lot of things. And having job coaches, we fill out job reflections every day. So we're able to get feedback from job coaches about, what to work on or what we're doing well. I think that's definitely something that I appreciate.
Let's see. Something I learned, right? That's the question?
I think we're talking about your job site.
Oh, okay.
Share that first.
Yeah, the job sites, I've been looking at Cornerstone. It's a pool where you kind of like clean the deck and stuff. It's kind of cool. I actually said to the job coordinator, I wanted to be a lifeguard when I'm soon, hopefully, I don't know when. And I said to her, I would like to work at Cornerstone. So I kind of made that job up for people part of this program. And so I think that's pretty cool. And then I work at a job site, Collins. It's a medical center where I get to like scan like medical documents. And then I work at also CVS, where we do like stocking shelves and stuff. And then we also have a cooking class where we learn how to make a meal for yourself. There's 2 groups. One does the side, and then the other one makes the main meal. And then we kind of like decide together what to make. So if you at town hall, you normally go like, you take this city bus to Caldwell, and you kind of figure out your budget, and then you go to Big Y to get this stuff, and you shop, and you try to do it in your budget, and then you go back and you make the things, and then make the food, and then you get to eat the food, which is good. And then and I think every week, I think that's very helpful, just like learning what kind of meals you can make when you live on your own.
On Sarah's behalf, I'd like to share that her vocational sites that she shared in her writing. Last year, she was at Culinary, Coffee Cart, and the Smith Cafeteria. This year, she's at Hound and Home, the next chapter, and she's starting Salt and Lime next week, which should be exciting. But she does say, the question was, what do you enjoy most about post-secondary? And her answer was the jobs, especially next chapter. Do you have anything you want to add?
Do you want to say anything else? No. Okay. Do you have any questions for that?
I think you guys were planning to share something you thought others should know about the program. And I'll start, Sarah, can I share your answer? Yeah. Sarah shared that they do jobs and are learning to be independent. She wants to drive and take the city bus.
I think that one of the great things about this program is that you get to, after when you graduate from the program, you kind of get that independently, and you get to like live on your own. Maybe that's I wanted to do anyway. It's different for everybody, but I think this program has a lot to offer, and I'm glad that I'm part of it.
I think I want everyone to know just how important this program is to all of the students involved. And I think it's hard to see that when you're not a student or you're not a teacher, but it really is something that provides so many things from, vocational skills, building independence, forming community, making friends, having a classroom of people that, we all have something in common, and then we all have things that are so different that we can learn about from each other. And so, yeah, it just really means a lot, and it's really important to so many students.
Those are such great reflections. If it's okay with you, I bet the board might have some questions or comments that they'd like to share with you.
Fellow board members, any questions? John?
It's really more of a comment of how much I enjoy visiting the next chapter with my family. I think it's really one of those special bookstores in town, in a town that has a lot of them. And I just want to thank you for it. And I also want to say that, Vi, you said something that it's hard to see the value of the program when you're not in it, and that might be so, but I think you did an incredible job, and all the students tonight did a great job of conveying how important the program is, both to you, your families, and the entire community. So I just want to thank you for that.
Jason?
Yeah, I just really echo that. Your timing is really important. I don't know if you know that, but we're about to go into our budget season, and you are the reason, why we do so much of this. And so you are a wonderful reminder as we get into that season. All three of you should know just how impressive you are. To come up here to present. We still get nervous. We still think this is a very awkward thing to do. You guys seem like pros. Another shout out to the next chapter is amazing. Lots of holiday shopping. Valentine's Day is coming up. Very important. Check it out if you haven't. It is a true treasure for West Hartford. Next time, bring the cart.
We will.
Any other questions? Ethan?
So to echo what was said, my daughter came home from Europe with her children, and that was where she wanted to go, was the next chapter bookstore, because they had books she thought she wanted. So we're happy customers.
Good.
Miriam?
Also, to echo everybody's sentiments and to express to you as well how impressive you are. And as a parent of a student with multiple disabilities, you give me, and I hope many other parents in our community, so much hope and optimism and so much to be proud of, and just to know that your impact is not just, it's really community-wide. Your involvement in the community and the examples that you're setting for all of our students and our students going forward who are moving through the continuum of services. So I want to thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'm just going to layer right on top of all of that and say that you guys are just such a huge testament to what an amazing continuum of programming exists in this district. And I know that it's been a destination district for years, going back. My mother was a special education paraeducator at Whiting Lane, so I know that it's just such an investment and such a reward for everyone involved, and you all are exceptional in your ability to come up and represent the program. One question I have is, are there other places looking at this as a model? Because it seems like it should be everywhere.
Can I let Vi answer that? I think Vi has some information about that.
So I will say that I've learned through helping manage the social media that we've had other districts with similar programs come into the store. I think Southington is starting their own sort of bookstore as well, sort of inspired by what we've done. We have, I think students from Middletown have come in and just seen the store, and we have a lot of teachers that come in from out of district that have heard of us, that want to know more, and just get involved.
I cannot top Vi's testimonial, but I wanted to share that Melissa and Dr. Andy Morrow presented at a national conference as well about this model. And I take opportunity to say you guys are truly impressive. And Sarah, I miss seeing you at the coffee cart.
Well, thank you so much for these fabulous students for joining us on a school night nonetheless. If we could give them a round of applause, and we'll let them head out. Thank you so much. Just watch your heads. Just watch your head, Vi. Great job. We're so fortunate, to do this job every day and get to work with students like that. We're truly the lucky ones. Continuing, well, let me pause. Were there any questions that you had about the first part of our presentation, or do you want me to continue on? And
Miriam?
I just had one quick question. Can you help us understand, where do students with 504 plans fall into this, and how does the Department of Pupil Services support students with 504 plans? Or is that a separate presentation?
It's actually a separate presentation. 504, because it's accommodations and modifications, it actually lives jointly between my side of the house, and Ann McKiernan and I are both co-coordinators. We do have a dedicated administrator who does oversee 504 plans, and she and I meet regularly to review and support families. But But as Britt Killian said about SEPTO, really open doors. We've really seen such a huge welcoming effort from our new SEPTO board. And so that's also inclusive of 504 families because they're looking for a connection point. And so that's actually been a great connection point for them too. But good question.
Ethan?
It's a question. You mentioned private schools. American School of the Deaf, that must have a large number of students, doesn't it? Or we only do part of it?
So the American School for the Deaf is actually considered one of those ABCEPs, the approved special education schools that Kelly was mentioning earlier. Private schools, the not-for-profit schools, are like private parochial schools. Northwest Catholic, Solomon and Schechter, those schools are a little bit different. If a PPT was to place a student at the American School for the Deaf, the district would be funding that placement because a PPT made it. Separate and different are our private schools. So those are the schools that Kelly was talking about in the geographic area of West Hartford. The students may or may not be West Hartford residents. It might be a Cheshire resident, a Bloomfield resident that chooses to attend those schools. West Hartford assumes the responsibility for Child Find, and a proportionate share fund of our IDEA grant goes to that. That calculation is made annually, and we meet with those schools for meaningful consultation, those families, talk about how that grant's going to be written, what the annual allocation might potentially be, and what it will be used for the following year.
I have two quick questions. One is related to the private school enrolled students. Does that get any, beyond IDEA funding, does it get factored in any way with the excess cost special education funding?
Goes back to those two APSEP versus private, because the private is proportionate share, so it would never hit the threshold.
Good point.
Yeah, but the
back to
APSEPs, the
Barb.
private schools that we place students at, they may, contribute to that excess cost sharing because that's 4.5 times the amount of us, right? So that might meet that threshold, and then we can count it.
So any additional resources you need to put towards the private school enrolled students has to come out of the IDEA grant? Because I imagine it's time of
And
your
it's capped.
staff. Okay.
It's capped at a proportionate share amount that comes out of the grant.
Okay. And then related to the outplacement student, I know that number has decreased since
significantly,
and which is awesome because I think for those, in the last couple of years, we've heard efforts being made to show that West Hartford is able to provide the fair and adequate education for many students here in the district. And so therefore, students re-entering or not ever leaving the district for outplacement. So it sounds like those efforts are working, and that is a significant impact when it comes to budgeting, because I know that do you have a sense of the average cost per student for outplacement? Because
not off the top of my head.
But I know it's
yeah,
significant.
it
So
is.
I think by addressing that, and it's really a messaging issue of communicating out how well the district can serve students here right within West Hartford Public Schools. So kudos to that number coming down.
Yes, thank you. All right. Well, that's a perfect segue right into our students on the continuum. So as Kelly mentioned, when students do need something beyond what we could provide in the public schools, we leverage our partnerships with EPSEPs. And so those are our approved special education schools that are in the state or sometimes out of the state. And those are PPT-driven decisions based on a student's need. And when we determine that, for whatever reason, the student might need a higher level of care. And we oversee and monitor, and I think that's really important to Shannon's point. We have a dedicated full-time administrator, Lauren Dell, who oversees our out-of-district placements, and we feel very strongly that those students are still our students. And so, as Kelly was mentioning earlier, we visit them regularly. We are connected with their families. Lauren does a lot of outreach and support. We want the students to know that while they might attend another school, that they are part of our school system. They are part of our community. Many of the students who might require day programs that are attending somewhere else actually still attend all of our extracurricular activities. They might participate on our sports teams. They might participate in our unified theater and unified organizations. And we're so happy to have that continued engagement because our goal, if appropriate, is always to return them back to our school district. And so we're always working with our teams to make sure that they're receiving the maximum benefit if they're anywhere else. As we look at our administrative structure, we have a lot of administrative oversight of our teams, of our school programs, and we don't expect anything less of students who are placed along the continuum. And so, as Shannon mentioned, there's been great efforts to make sure that students who might need more, that we're monitoring them, and when they're ready to return, that we're putting together very individualized plans to bring them back successfully. And I was looking back over some data before this meeting, and back in 2024, I think we had brought back 38 students. And since then, I think it's been almost 60 that we've brought back to district very successfully. And that looks different for every student. It might start off as bifurcated programming where students might attend just a period of the day at their comprehensive high school or one day a week on Wednesdays for the shortened day at the elementary level, whatever works for that student. Some students return to one of our more intensivized programs, and some students are returning to our general milieu and might just have a resource model or some academic support classes. It's all very student specific, but what we've really established with our ABSET partners is that it is our goal that these are our students, that we will be very involved in their education, and that when we do bring them back, we want their partnership, ensuring that that's successful. And so we've really seen some really creative ideas, whether it's video modeling, school teams who loved our students so much they keep in touch by having virtual chats, or sometimes they've even sent their clinicians to our schools to make sure the student is successful in that transition. So it's looked a lot of different ways, but really it's individualized for the student. Last year at this time, we had over 140 students outplaced. This year, it would have been 120, but we had some move-ins over the holiday break, so it's 124 is the date that we pulled the data. And so as Kelly was mentioning, those numbers do change all the time based on families' current registration enrollment. And so we were just planning some more site visits to get out and meet those new students that we don't yet know so that we can develop relationships with those families and get to know them better and see how we can best support them. But it has been an ongoing effort to make sure that students who we're looking to program for, that we're placing them in the least restrictive environment. And we know that students have really strong outcomes when they're with their non-disabled peers. But there are times that students might need a full special education program, but we like to just monitor that to make sure that the outcomes are still rigorous and that the program is still high quality. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the importance of partnerships with our parents. We are so lucky to have such great relationships with families. They know their children best, and we value their insights, perspectives, and they truly are a part of our team. And I hope they always feel that way. We've been so lucky with Britt and the new leadership team really expanding SEPTO's offering, making it very inclusive community, different ways to engage, different levels. There's structured formats, there's more social formats, and then we'll have our annual transition meeting, so we have some key things that happen across the year, but really some nice opportunities for families to engage in the community and join without having to worry about paying a fee or a membership. They can just attend whatever they feel comfortable with or have the opportunity to go to. Kelly and I host parent workshops across the year. Every year it's different. Every spring we host transition activities that really talk about different things that parents should be aware of as their students become teens and young adults. That might include conservatorship, services and agencies beyond public education, what that looks like. We're seeing some long wait lists for our agencies like Department of Developmental Services and the autism waiver. Right now, the autism waiver is over 10 years long. So we're really trying to encourage elementary families who think their child might be eligible to apply now so that by the time their child is of age, even if they get the call and they say, we don't need it just yet, at least they're in the queue, because if they don't apply until they're 22, we have students who might not be eligible for services until they're 32. So we're really trying to be proactive with our communication with parents around what's available to them. We also put out quarterly parent newsletters to inform them of events that are happening in the district and community, because we do partner with other area districts that have events or speakers that will be coming in, so we like to cross-promote. We partner with a number of area groups. We do a Coffee with the Director series, which can include special guests or special topics. We have one coming up on dyslexia in a couple of weeks. So we really try to monitor what would be of importance to families to talk about. And then always, as I said, community offerings within other towns. But, really a plug to SEPTO for their great partnership. We're looking forward to our event tomorrow night to really support families who are looking at transition between levels. And we really encourage families who might not have a fifth grader rising to middle school next year, but those fourth graders to those parents to come too, so that they can hear more about what that transition activity will be, that things that happen behind the scenes and what they can expect, just to kind of reduce some of the stress and anxiety. Our kids get stressed enough about change, and as parents, that's hard for us too. And so we like to provide as much information up front so that parents are feeling confident with the information that they have and knowledgeable when they go into the year that they're planning their transition. So we're looking forward to that event, and we're so grateful for our parents and their partnerships for their children. And with that, that concludes our formal presentation, and Kelly and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have for us.
Any questions? John?
Yes, well, thank you for your presentation tonight. And I had a question about the intensive behavior program and how it relates to some of the discipline practices and policies generally, and what's the intersection between the two in terms of when a child might be placed into the behavior program after some incidents at the school, and how do those programs talk to each other?
It's a really good question. And so we actually like to think about it in reverse. We like to say, what does a student need, and how can we be responsive to that need? And so a student might be displaying to us and communicating through their behaviors and challenges that they might need something smaller, less stimulus, more therapeutic. They might need more direct instruction or in-the-moment coping skills teaching. And that process can happen over time. So we like to always intervene slowly. So if we see a student might be struggling to manage their feelings and emotions, we might put supports in place such as a behavior intervention plan. We might conduct assessments to better understand what in the environment might be resulting in some of those behaviors, to see if there's environmental changes we can make for that student, whether it's providing them regular reinforcement, breaks. Sometimes those things are very effective in helping students really regulate their feelings and emotions and communicate with us in different ways about their wants and needs. And then it would be, looking in to see how responsive that is. But if they still need that more intensivized, smaller environment to really be successful, then we move along that. It is a PPT placement. We do have a lot of safeguards in place because, again, our responsibility is to the least restrictive environment. So if a student's already eligible for special education and we're making that recommendation, there's a process by which we have the team consult with a homeschool first. So a BCBA and or special education teacher from one of our programs, and this is true for intensive academic as well, because our goal is always to keep children in their home school. A change to a new school is very traumatic for a student. And so we're very thoughtful about that process. And so what might happen first is there's a consultation, and that team that works in the behavior program will come to the home school, talk about the student, meet with the parents, meet with the school team, observe the student, and maybe make recommendations to the team, like, have you tried these things? Here's a way to tighten up your behavior plan. Let's look at changing these items in the environment. And that might really provide for success for students, and we actually have seen students successfully stay in their home school. But if students need more, then the PPT would make that recommendation to explore that behavior program and then potentially place in the program. But relative to actual discipline as it relates, there's actually not a correlation. So discipline wouldn't necessarily be an indicator that a student needs a more intensive behavior program. It might be that they have a disciplinary consequence for a mistake that they've made, and they might be learning from. And so that might be separate and different. And so while a student might display behaviors, they're not always outward-facing behaviors. They could be more internal behaviors. It could be coping skills behaviors. And so we really try to look at behaviors as a communication to us so that we better understand as the adults how we can be responsive.
Oh, thank you. And just one follow-up question. If, let's say a student is at Duffy School, and they're third grader at Duffy School, and all the steps are made, and ultimately the decision is made to put them into a behavioral program, and they go to, say, Morley. If they go to Morley, if, let's say, now the students started in third grade at Duffy, get some time passed, now we're getting to fourth grade, are they going into a regular fourth grade class at Morley with additional supports, or is it an entirely self-contained program?
So that's a great
So
question.
what's that student being told?
Yeah, so the students might start, depending, again, every student's different. So there are students who might require a period of being self-contained in a smaller therapeutic environment before they're matriculating out with their peers, or they might be starting in the program with times that we already know that they're successful, like if they have a preferred subject area or special, they might be still engaging with their peers. They are always assigned a general homeroom classroom. They are always still members of a class. In the fourth grade, they have a fourth grade teacher, and they have the Learning Center as a separate additional resource to them. Many of our students spend most of their time in the general education setting and some time in the smaller Learning Center. And what we see is over time, as they develop coping skills, they will spend more time with their general education peers and less time in the Learning Center. But of course, growth is not a straight trajectory. There are bumps along the way. And so that's why the Learning Center is there, because they could always come back, reset, remember what their coping strategies are, receive a little bit of extra support and encouragement before they're reintegrating again with their peers. And in that case, if a student's very successful, because that's happened too, a student moves into a program with the right supports and coaching, does very well, they might matriculate into the resource program at Morley. So they might stay as a Morley student, even though Duffy's their home school. They might be exiting from the behavior program and just be matriculated as a regular fourth grade student who might receive some resource support or a touch point with one of the special education teachers. And that gives us a barometer of how is the student doing with the support present in the building, but maybe they're not part of the program. And it gives us that continuum that we were talking about. We have a continuum in, but we have a continuum out too. And since that student's already moved, we might keep them there all the way through their elementary years and talk to them about, your home middle school is Cedric, but if you develop positive peer relationships, maybe there's a consideration of you moving on with your peers that might be tracking to King Philip, for example. So we really try to make the decisions very individualized based on the student.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Miriam?
Thank you for your report and all of the hard work and care that you provide to open opportunities for all of our students. My question is looking at, all the care and all the support to follow students who, whether they're outplaced or in a private school, and that responsibility to manage the IEP falls within Department of Pupil Services, are students who are coming, so the reverse, so students who are coming from outside of West Hartford through whatever programs, and if they happen to have IEPs, does that responsibility also fall under our Department of Pupil Services, and are those numbers counted in these totals?
So are you talking about like students who move into district who have, who might be outplaced?
I was thinking more like open choice students, or because we're looking at like magnet and other things going out. So I was just curious, like students who are coming in, who they have, or if they have needs or they're identified once they're already part of our programs, who manages that process, and are those numbers part of our totals collectively?
Thank you for clarifying. Yes, they are. So we consider open choice students our students. They might have that identification, and it's important for us to know that so that, we could track transportation, which might work a little bit differently, but for all intents and purposes, they are our students. And so they function just like any other student would in our building, and our administrators and school teams have full oversight of their IEPs. We do invite Hartford to those meetings because they do like to be included, and they will participate whenever they're available. But we believe they're our students, and we take the responsibility for their education and development of their plans just as seriously as residents.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, Kelly, anything
Oh, no, I was
to
just
add?
going to say thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you both. It is so obvious in the way that you speak and the thoughtfulness with which you just plan and execute everything through the program, that you love what you do, and it is then reflected in the students that you support. So thank you for everything that you do every day. So thank you.
Excellent job.
Now moving on to our semi-annual restorative practices response report, and we will be joined by Julio Duarte, Teresa Rengel, and Susan Horvath.
Excellent. And I'll just make brief comments while they prepare themselves and get settled. And my gratitude for Susan Horvath. She is our principal at Bugby Elementary School, for her presence tonight and reflections on how some of this work kind of manifests within the school setting. I did want to remind you that with the passage of 2 new policies that were mandated by the State Department of Education, but actually aligned very nicely to our approach and our work here in the district, you as a board had asked for a semi-annual report, really report twice annually on how we're doing with challenging behavior. That was really the new buzzword. The state's kind of really broadened the understanding of what bullying is and introduced this new term of challenging behavior. But this is an opportunity to kind of look at where we are halfway through the year and to give a glimpse at our approaches with restorative practice work. But as I mentioned, we do have a fuller report that we plan to provide for you in February, in early February, I believe on the 3rd. I know they don't have a PowerPoint, but at some point during the meeting, they will be referencing the one-page handout that was left, and there were copies in addition left at the table for any members of the public. So with that, I'll turn this over to the team and let them provide you with a great summary.
All right, good evening, everyone, again. So as Paul had mentioned, this school year, the Connecticut Department of Education required all school districts to adopt the updated school climate policy as well as the restorative practices response policy to address incidents of challenging behavior, which Paul mentioned. And just for calibration, I'll remind us of that definition, which is behavior that negatively impacts school climate or interferes or is at risk of interfering with student learning or safety or the safety of a school employee. And so that was a very new and broad definition that the department put out there. When this policy was adopted by the board back in December and then revisited and revised again in November, it directed the administration to collect and maintain data on the types of challenging behaviors and to report them out semi-annually, and to disaggregate those also by students of color and students with disabilities. And so, you'll see in the report, which we'll walk through, that we were able to do that. You'll see also, and then that the asterisks will represent numbers that essentially were lower than 10, and that was one of the things that was really important for us because some of these numbers, they are very small. They may be 1, 2, and so we wanted to really be thoughtful about that to ensure that there was no way that someone could specifically draw back to an incident that may have occurred with a student and have that be identifiable to them. I want to begin by emphasizing 2 critical points that I hope will help frame how this report is interpreted. The first is, again, given the change in definitions, the change in the definition for bullying, a very big change for us, and we've talked a little bit about that at the board table, but really taking a look at that is wanted to use this year as really an opportunity to start to draw what we would consider a baseline or establish that baseline. I know we started to look at just data in the past, and it just started to become really tricky because of the definitions changing and trying to figure out where to draw those lines. So we thought this is really a good opportunity to start to establish that new baseline and to take a look at information going forward. So that'll really help us, I think, better understand patterns over time, the impact that our practices have, and make informed decisions on how best to improve school climate and student support. The other piece that I wanted to really think about is something that I continuously remind myself, is that every single number that you see here, really it represents a student. And it's not just the number that we put on a piece of paper, it goes back and I think the thing that we always talk about is that it's a number on a piece of paper, but again, it symbolizes a student and a student that has a unique story. And certainly, I think when you look at some of the disciplinary pieces that occur. And I'm often brought back to my time in the building as an assistant principal when, much of my time was spent dealing with behavioral referrals and things that were sent down. And, I can remember getting them on my desk and looking at it and thinking, again, same thing, and getting frustrated when I first saw that and sometimes even angry, calling that student down to my office and then saying, hey, tell me about this, and then hearing their version of it, but more importantly hearing the story that came with it, right? What went on at home before they came to school? What was going on in their own personal lives? What was going on in all those different pieces that really I was allowed to do in my role, and I had the opportunity to do in my role. And I'll tell you that when I was able to do that and sit down, that oftentimes those feelings of, as I mentioned, perhaps frustration and disappointment, they quickly started to change, right? And they changed to understanding and empathy and really trying to look at, certainly, we're going to have to do something to hold you accountable for your behavior and the harm that you've done. But more importantly, let's take a look at what we need to do to help you understand and what supports do we need to put in place. And I was sitting in the back and listening to Melissa, who always says things, I think, so eloquently, and really looking at, what is the student's behavior telling us? And I think that that's one of the things that our administrators do, and I know Susan will talk a little bit more about that they're so skilled at, is that they really take the time to realize that this isn't just a task that I have a set of referrals I need to get through and hold students accountable, move on. No, this is about really sitting down, hearing what happened, helping them understand, hey, here's what your behavior did. Here's how it made people feel. What do we need to help you understand that? What do we need to do to move forward with that? And I know that Teresa will also talk about some of the great work that she's doing. And so for that reason, my hope is that as you take a look at this report and that as we walk through that this isn't just a report that presents counts of offenses that have occurred this year. It really is going to give us an understanding of the patterns and help us guide to what we need to do to make sure that we're being effective and that we have equitable practices across all of our districts and that we're taking into account the stories that come with every single student. Because I know that oftentimes, even right when I make a mistake, I want people to give me an opportunity to understand where I was coming from so that we can work on those things and hopefully come to a better understanding. And truly, I believe that's what helps build strong relationships. And so I think that's also at the heart and the foundation of everything that we do. So if you look at page 17 in your board packet, you'll find a chart that provides an overview of the 10 reporting categories and a description for each. So these categories are the incident types that make up each category, and these are established by the Connecticut State Department of Education. And they essentially determine how incidents across all the districts need to be coded. And, at first, when you hear that, you may think, oh, that's pretty straightforward. Unfortunately, though, that's not the case sometimes, because what ends up happening is that these definitions may require us to code something that, truthfully, if we had, I think, a little bit more discretion, we may have a different thought in that process. And so, one of the examples that I will highlight is on page 18. You'll see that the very first number there is this category for fighting. And you probably think, oh, fighting, I know what that is. And then you look at the chart for elementary and you see 12 there, and you must, the first reaction is, oh my goodness, 12 fights at the elementary school. And, what's interesting, and I'll read you the definition just so that we can be calibrated on that as well, is that the state defines fighting/physical aggression. It includes a physical confrontation in which one or more participants receive a minor physical injury that does not require professional medical attention, such as a scrape. And so, again, I don't want to minimize that, but I think that's important for us to contextualize that, is that, as you know, right, and again, I know that Susan will talk a little bit more about that, but students in the early elementary years especially, are still developing skills related to emotional regulation and really even understanding personal boundaries. And as a result, sometimes a little brief disagreement over perhaps, who won the soccer game, which sometimes at recess may be the World Cup, or as equally as important as the World Cup, I understand that. But that quickly is de-escalated by a staff member. However, because of perhaps something that may have occurred, that may require us to categorize that as a fight. And so again, I just want us to sort of have that context in mind, because I think that, if we had some more leeway, we may not go in that direction, but we want to make sure that we're following, what's prescribed and doing it that way. So as you review the incident categories and totals, I want you to know that every incident is viewed through a developmental and contextual lens. Again, the administrators will have and take the time to hear the story, right? In that scenario that I described, is getting to understand, hey, what caused that fight to occur, right? And understanding how important that game may have been to those students, and in that moment, how critical, scoring that goal, or maybe he was offsides, maybe they weren't offsides. We recognize that disagreement, but helping them understand that the choice they made wasn't the right choice, and there were other ways to handle that. And so really walking through some of those pieces. You'll see that the vast majority of our reported incidents fall under the category called school policy violations, and particularly at the secondary level, which is an extremely broad category. And that includes many, many things that essentially are a violation of school rules, such as disruptive or inappropriate behavior. There's insubordination. There's even misuse of a hall pass. So there's just an array of items that are in there, and it becomes really a place that a lot of these, I'll call them perhaps more minor offenses, get logged in there. I'm also happy to report that for a more serious category, such as violent crimes against persons, those remain rare and even non-existent in this reporting period. But with that said, we recognize that even one incident is too much, and as Paul mentioned, that many of these have no place in our school, and one of those that I want to highlight is the category of personal and threatening behavior. And in this category, that does include what the state calls our racial slurs, and they actually do racial slurs / hate crimes. And so there's no way to separate those, and I know that the state's actually looking at that right now, because I think attaching those two together, especially when you start talking about hate crimes and things like that, is something that's really a very, very serious piece, and certainly we want to take a look at that. But when you look at that category, the racial slurs themselves, if you pull them out, actually account for approximately a third of the category's total there. And so as we mentioned before, even one is too high, and there certainly is no place for this, but all of these incidents are things that we want to continue to work on, and I know Teresa will talk more about that, and I know Paul talked about our approaches to that, but I do think it's important for us to be transparent about that and to continue to look at, we have work to do there. On page 19, you'll see a chart that lists the number of challenging behavior incidents that resulted in one of the formal discipline sanctions listed in the chart. And so what we're required to do is to essentially track the discipline referral for these various types, or the challenging behaviors that result in these types of disciplinary pieces. I do think it's important, because people are always going to say, are these all of the challenging behaviors that occurred in the school? And the answer to that is no. And the reason that is because honestly, most of the time, these aren't going to get tracked into a disciplinary referral, because they're going to be handled at the teacher level. They're going to be handled in the classroom, right? You think about the student that may be off task, may be starting to create a disruption, and the skillful teacher is going to ask them either whatever signal they have. If they have a signal to help them regroup, they may say, hey, do you need to take a quick break to get a water? And go get a drink of water and come back, and they sort of recalibrate themselves. And so there is no need to further, and certainly not look for disciplinary pieces. And those are the things that, we continue to work on. We call our tier 1 pieces, and ways to help students, right? And one of the things that I'm seeing too is students being great advocates for themselves. And when they're starting to struggle, that they raise their hand, and that's K through 12, where they'll be able to raise their hand, or they've got something they pre-established with the teacher to say, hey, I need to go down and see my school counselor, so that I can process, what's going on before we get to a point where there is a infraction, or even just going up to various folks. I remember, again, being at the high school, and students would go up to our security guards and say, hey, I need to go down to my school counselor. Can you walk me down there? I want to make sure that I don't do anything silly on the way there. And they know who those trusted adults are in the building that they can trust. And I think about my own relationship with, some of my teachers, and certainly the security guards, and it wasn't that. And again, I think that's a testament to the folks that are in our building, and the relationships that they're doing, and the relationships that they're building with our students, to be able to sort of look at those pieces and to make sure that they're minimizing all of the things that are occurring there. One of the other things I want to highlight again is on that page 19, is that when you take a look at the chart, and you'll see that they're all reported in there, and you'll see that the asterisks again are in there. And the removal from class is one of the things that, I've been really proud of the work we're doing, and we continue to do that. Because, again, going back to my time, that used to be one of the, I'll call it your go-to, things in your toolbox as someone in the classroom was, to tell a student that perhaps wasn't, following along exactly with how you wanted him, was to get out and go to the office, right? I think all of us see a lot of the head nodding from our esteemed board members is that they probably got to see, not experience, but see that occurring as well in their classroom and in their educational setting. And again, really talking to teachers and helping them develop their toolboxes on, what are other ways to address that. Because again, the most important thing is we want to keep kids in the classroom. And so we've done a really nice job of, I think, continuing to move in that direction. So as you'll see, and in general, whenever possible, our goal is to use in-school supports or instructional consequences rather than exclusionary discipline. This reflects our intentional decision-making process to keep students connected to learning and to keep them connected to school as a whole. This provides us with the opportunity to do the restorative work necessary to address behavior, repair harm, and build the skills students need to be not only successful in that class, but also successful in life. And so one of the things I wanted to do was I've invited my good friend Susan here to have her give us sort of, and it's not, there's an asterisk with her that these aren't Bugby specific, but certainly in conversations with colleagues, some of the things that, they're seeing and doing. And I've asked her a little bit to touch on too with, in-school suspension, particularly at the elementary school, because I think back and what may be the perception of what an in-school suspension is. And so I thought it'd be important for us to just have a real understanding of what that is, what that actually looks like. And I thought to highlight that at the elementary school would be, a great starting point. So I'll turn it over to Susan.
Thank you, and nice to meet you all officially for the first time. So much of what you were saying resonated with me, and certainly those are the views and the philosophy that we espouse at Bugby, as well as our 10 other counterparts in our elementary schools and our secondary. We hadn't talked about this. You were referencing a soccer game and some dispute, so you clearly are very in tune with what happens at elementary recess. There might be a sport or a preferred activity, or say a gaga pit or something really fun and enticing. And sometimes we do see conflict there, and sometimes it can turn physical at times. And as we mentioned, and even going back to Melissa and Kelly, not everyone has the communication skills that, might be expected at a certain age. So sometimes we see our students making what you had referred to before as maybe mistakes or something that they would want to take back. And an example that I'm thinking about from that recess activity was there was a dispute over some refereeing calls, shall we say. And, this might have happened at Bugby or other places, but this is certainly an elementary story. And what Julia was saying about getting to the bottom of the story and helping to understand, I think some of the work that we're doing with restorative practices and pre-sortive practices and having all of our students feel welcome and belonging in our culture opens up those lines of communication. So when we do have group talks, if there is an issue at recess, students are much more willing to talk and they're willing to process, and it helps us understand the why. So you had referenced these numbers are all faces and students, and they're doing the best that they can every single day. Well, come to find out, there were some rule disputes over a particular game at recess. So once we talked with several students who were involved in that, they were able to isolate what those were and come up with a plan moving forward. And so it was a set of rules that was agreed upon, and it was just very much like Julio said, when we're thinking about that recess and the expectations that we have of students in that unstructured environment, it's been a wonderful tool to come back to talking it out, working it out, thinking as a group, what could we do? And if there was harm, how can we restore it? How can we repair it? And so that was basically something that I wanted to share that's regularly and ongoing, not just at the administrative level, but also for our amazing classroom teachers and grade level staff who are out at recess. In terms of kind of in-school suspension and what that might look like at the elementary level, it looks like whatever the student needs that day, but very typically at the elementary level, it would mean myself or another administrator greeting that student as they walk in the morning. Probably there's been a conversation the day before about what has happened. Oftentimes there's a clinician available to talk with and process with the student. And the goal of in-school suspension is certainly to reflect upon whatever harm has been caused towards others and work towards restoring that. So whether that means learning more about the harm that was potentially caused, reflecting on previous actions. It might include apologies of action or talking with people or individual classmates who have been harmed. It very much likely does not look like how many of us might have experienced that growing up. It's a lot of talking and processing and contact with adults who are very supportive in whatever the goals are for that day to have that student understand what the situation was and what we could do differently moving forward. At the elementary level, sometimes we say we teach math, we teach reading, but we also teach those skills for self-regulation very explicitly, just like we might teach an algorithm for 2x2 digit multiplication. Some students may need that, and so we're able to provide that in those settings, and that may look a little bit different than our secondary counterparts, but we've found that that's a wonderful opportunity to process with the student and also make sure that the family is incorporated with a reentry meeting and talking about what does that day look like, because we want to be transparent. We want the family to understand what that time looks like and what the student will be focusing on during the school day.
Thank you. Again, perfectly said, and I bring up those sports analogies because I may be a little competitive myself, so they just resonate with me. But I know that on the bottom of page 19 as well, you'll see what essentially the board has asked for is the breakdown there by race as well as by our special ed status. And I just want to, really highlight too that the segregated data is included, and it's not there to label or to stigmatize anyone. I think it's really there for us to just be transparent. And I was talking a lot with Teresa about this, and I think the piece that we've really looked at when we've broken down this data, and since the school year has started, I meet every month with all of our assistant principals. It's either with sometimes the high school or the middle school and the elementary, and we've been really transparent. I've been really transparent with bringing this data, and I do break it down by schools because in that setting we can be more transparent and really looking at that with our folks. And I want us to ask the deep question, right? And it's been grounded in this question that I ask every time is, are our systems responding consistently, fairly, and effectively for all students? And while the data clearly shows that our system is serving many students well, it also makes it equally clear that we must do better, particularly for our Hispanic/Latino students and our Black students. The data compels us to look more deeply at our instructional practices, the supports we provide, and the adult decisions we make every day. And as I talked about, one of the concrete things that I do is when we meet with our assistant principals, we're really having and engaging in open and honest conversations where, we've got, and I think we've done a lot of good work to establish the relationships within those groups and those pieces so that, we're taking an actual scenario that's occurred at a school, right? And we're putting it out on the table and we're saying, hey, here's what happened. Here's how it was addressed. And going through those. And sometimes we're just saying, hey, here's the scenario. Let's take a pause. How would you have handled this? Having folks turn and talk to their partner, how would you have handled this? What questions do you have going through that? And really then also as we've processed all those pieces and reflected on that, we go back and ask, hey, have we missed anything? Did we miss something that maybe could have actually just prevented this altogether, right? Because there's one thing to say, hey, what do we do now that it's happened? But I think it's important for us to always look at our systems and things, say, are we missing anything, right? Could we have done something different? Is there an educational component that we need to be doing across, the grade level, the school, perhaps with all students before recess starts is, just calibrating on expectations. And so, it's been a really interesting piece, and I will commend all the administrators, the principals, the assistant principals of their openness and willingness to put out, what sometimes may not be very, exciting to share with colleagues, like, hey, here's what's going on. And, and certainly what I get to is this vibe that no one's ever like, thinking, I think most people are thinking, thank God that wasn't my school, right? And then trying to figure out and help, like, what can we do? And I know Susan can also share is just the amazing relationships that they have with each other and the confidence and hopefully trust they have in us too as central office that, they're constantly calling each other. They've got their text messages, but then they'll call either myself or they'll call Teresa and we sit down and we really go through and try to work it and think about like, hey, here's all the different things because we want to make sure that we're not missing anything, right? And I think Teresa and I have used this analogy is that, we've sort of, you're walking through this place where there's all these little traps and we know where many of them are, so we can help to make sure that you don't land on those. But we recognize that some of them even we don't know and some we don't anticipate coming. And that's why we really want to work together and strengthen all of these pieces. But I think, in these conversations that we have ongoing, Teresa's been a key member of that and really being able to just have those honest conversations. And it's not about sitting there and trying to just share all of the glows, right? We know we've got a lot of glows and those are things we want to celebrate and there's a time for that too. And that's really, really important. But we also think it's really important for us to sit there and look at what are the grows, right? And what are the things we can learn from each other and to think about. And I know when I was, again, in the building as a principal, it was rare that I wouldn't call Dan over at Hall when he was a principal and say, hey, like, here's what I got going on. What do you think? Or even just talking to other folks so that you can really look at those relationships that you have. And so at its core, this work is really about ensuring that our systems are consistently fair, effective, and responsive for every student that we serve. Again, I on some levels, I look at the data and there's pieces that I'm proud of, right? Because I know the work that we've done to try to prevent some of these pieces, but there's also pieces I look at and I'm sad and I know we've got work to do. And that's work that I'm confident I have the right folks, working on it. I'm confident that we're all looking and want the same thing, but it's certainly something that we need to continue to be transparent about. And so before I turn over to Teresa, I want to just return to the point that I made at the beginning, is that the numbers in this report, they're not abstract numbers, right? They're not students from other districts. They're our children, right? They're our children. And to me, each incident reflects a moment in the student's life, often involving an unmet need, a conflict, emotional dysregularity, or perhaps even just a skills gap that we need to look at, And so I think I'll be using Melissa's line, for every time I do this presentation, but is, taking a pause to look at what is that student's behavior trying to tell us. And oftentimes if we can stop and figure that out, right, that's where we start to really make impactful changes. So what I will do is I will turn it over to Teresa, which will talk about some of the work that we're doing in that area.
Great. Good evening and Happy New Year's and welcome to new board members. I think this is my first time right at the table since you've joined us. So really happy to be here. You'll learn very quickly. I'm always honest, always transparent, always pretty direct. I think one of the things as you were talking, Julia, that I was thinking about is, it's not just that we look at the numbers and we're like, oh gosh, we don't like that number. I think it's also looking for points of impact and where we can actually have some influence. And one of the things that we've discussed is perhaps looking at, when you think about the whole process, and it kind of dovetails into the work that I do with trying to be proactive about relationships, and when you think about when these moments are happening, there are definitely some infractions that are, there are things that are subjective, right? Things about like the subject of respect. Right? We all have very different definitions of respect. If I asked you what your definition of respect was, and I went through each and every one of you, not one of you would have the same definition. Not one of you, if you put your thoughts on a continuum, would it be the same? And so those, for me, are our touch points where we can actually have some conversations and look at changing practice. I will say that, as a district, we are not reacting to behavior. We are being proactive about laying a foundation that is going to support conditions that reduce harm, increase belonging, and prevent escalation before it occurs. So, one of the tricky things when people ask about data is because I'm the person who typically gets, and Julio as well, who gets these like crisis calls, something happened. So I can tell you without a doubt that has decreased. When I first got here, I remember telling Paul, I'm like, we might have to have a conversation because, my first year was a whirlwind. And if I felt like the district was on fire when I first got here. In a very weird way, I'm relieved to say that I feel like the world is on fire, but we're actually moving in the right direction with the work that we're doing. Latoya, I really appreciate your segue because it is, in reality, and it's funny because I was like, did she see my notes? Because I actually drew a stool. Because as I'm trying to, when I do this work, I'm always looking to frame it in a way that people understand. And I think what we've missed about this work with culture and climate is that this used to be a team sport. We had structures in place, right? If you think about our students as like that top part of a stool, and you had like a three-legged stool, you had schools in the middle, you had whatever faith-based support that you had on one side, and then you had community on the other side. And I'm sure probably everyone on this board has read like The Anxious Generation, and what started happening when we started feeding the narrative of not trusting our neighbors and not having that community. When I grew up, anyone on our street could discipline you. I know, that's a scary thought for you guys, right? But literally, that's what it was. And I'm not that old. But that used to be how it was. You trusted your neighbors. If you were coming home late for work, you weren't worried. There was a community that kept your children safe. We no longer feel that way. I work a lot with our faith-based organizations and communities. They're struggling to have members actively participate. Two parts of that, tri-legged stool have kind of fallen or are crumbling, and the one thing that people are continuing to expect to stay strong is the school system. And we are amazing. This is an amazing staff. I will stand by the staff. I do stand by the staff day in and day out. They are doing the work that from administrators all the way through. Everyone is showing up. We don't shy away from the fact that we don't feel like we're perfect. We are doing the learning as it comes, but we cannot do this alone. It's not just our charge. There's no way to replace what we're missing. And so I do echo that we need families to have this conversation. And what I tell people when I tell you to have conversations at home when it comes to talking about hate, particularly, I don't want you to talk about the hate that's personal to you. I want you to talk about the hate that's personal to someone else, because that's our problem. We know ourselves really well. It's why we don't actually teach, we try not to, particularly in elementary school, we try not to teach hate in these little buckets, because the reality is everybody knows their own really well, but you don't understand the other person's. I can promise you, unless you are a Black woman, it doesn't matter how much I tell you about anti-Blackness and what it feels like, you'll never understand what that feels like, and you'll never know the nuances the way I will know the nuances. And so it's really important that we don't fall into this trap of perfection. Our job is not to teach people to be able to identify the perfect segments of the different ways that hate shows up, but it's to understand the global importance that we all matter. We all, every person deserves an opportunity to be in the space, to be loved, to be cared for. I used to freak people out as an elementary principal because I threw the word love around a lot, and they were like really uncomfortable. Like, oh no, I love your children. Like, listen, if I come to work and after everything that we've gone through with the obscene number of school shootings that exist, if I come to work and am willing to stand in front and take a bullet for your child, then you better believe that I love your child. I will do anything for their support. I will do anything to see their success. And that's, I think we've shied away from emotional attachment and being honest about that to a point that I think that we've gone a little too far in the wrong direction. This is not a profession that you get into because you kind of like kids. You have to love what you do. These kids, like I said, I actually am super excited about our youth now and the fire that they have and the honesty that they demand, but it is not for the faint of heart. Like, you must love what you do. If you're standing in this space, if you're in this room and you work for this district, it's because you love children and you want a better world for them. So I want to kind of reiterate that, for restorative practice, 80%, if not more, I would argue more, but research says 80, is about the proactive things that you do to build relationships and connections. We train a select number of people in like the full process, where if you actually had to go through like a restorative conference, and that's because, quite frankly, untrained people attempting this create more harm. I can't tell you how many times I've seen it. And so we're very strategic about who has access to that training, their expectations, and you get better by practice, right? You have to actually have an opportunity to do this. That would not be, just for clarification, that would not typically be your classroom teacher. As a classroom teacher, I can tell you I've probably had to be involved in like a process even similar to that once. Like, it's not something that you typically have to be a part of or brought into. As a building administrator, you're going to live that life every like you're going to live that and you're going to do that. But the reality is we put our efforts into what we do proactively so that we can ensure that you don't get to the point of needing to actually have this full-blown conference. Because if you've ever seen one, it's not just I pull people together and I sit them in a meeting and we talk. I'm meeting with you privately first. I'm meeting the other person privately first. I'm making sure that you're ready. I'm assessing your readiness to actually be in that space and what you're hoping the outcomes are, and negotiating that process. And then I'm allowing you to actually bring other people into the space. And I got to meet with those people too, because they have to understand the rules and the parameters of what that looks like. It's not something that you ever necessarily want to have to go through. It's laborious, but it gets to the heart of what we're looking for, which is real accountability, which is, we have discipline. It's necessary function of what we have to do. But at the end of the day, real accountability is you being able to accept responsibility of your actions and being able to look for ways to make amends for that in a real meaningful way, right? So we are really looking at how we train and support and how we have teachers engage in real everyday practices that are going to actually support the day-to-day of how you interact with kids. So we have a continuum of learning that they are on this year. We have 6 modules. I actually highlighted, I gave you, I believe, all 6 of what they are. Collective efficacy and reinforcing practice circles have not quite occurred yet. Like, schools are in different spaces with them, but those are upcoming. Most schools are already either you're deep in the building trust with students, which obviously is super important, or you're moving on to collective efficacy at this point. But we started with respect agreements, and it's a foundational point for us for instead of having rules, like being able to understand that respect is something that we agree on as a community, and how should I expect to be treated, and how as a student, and how should I expect, what do I think you as the adult in charge. What does that look? What does respect look like for you? And kind of having this agreement amongst each other that kind of allows us to move as a community. In elementary school, it's I love it in elementary school because things are very concrete with elementary students. Like, because anytime something happens, it's like you look back at the respect agreement. I'm not sure that this actually follows our respect agreement, and kids are like, oh no, it's not. But it's just it's a really safe way to remind kids of what we've agreed to. It's also a very pointed way, particularly when you have guests in your room, that they can anchor onto the culture of that room, because those respect agreements are basically the agreements. It tells you a lot about what this room, what this group of people want out of their experience in being in school. Let me move on to effective statements, like just being able to acknowledge your feelings in something and how it's connecting and making you feel. Impromptu conversations, when Julia was talking about a lot of these things don't end up on our behavioral chart. That's impromptu conversations. That's your ability to be able to manage through relationships, having the conversations with students and negotiating with them about, something I've noticed that happening, or something that might be, acting opposite of our respect agreements. Or even if you just notice tension arising amongst students, it's a perfect opportunity for you to kind of step in and to make sure that you're building connections with students, and that as a teacher, you have however many students you have, but every student needs something from you. And so it's your job, your responsibility to kind of understand that and know that. And then, building trust with students. This one I think was a bit of a, when you give students an opportunity to tell you how they feel about you. honestly, right? And you get to ask them their opinion, and you get to anonymously, right? They get to just tell you, right? I think that's it's one of these things where it requires a real purpose of why you're doing it, and you have to be willing to listen to the feedback and be responsive to it. And I tell people all the time, listen, we're gonna do this. We're gonna do either, whether it's focus groups or it's surveys or however you choose to do it. But then you're going to take an opportunity to, you might go into your office, close the door, and scream because you didn't like what you heard. But that once you get that out of your system, then you have to come back to the table, and you have to process that with your team, and you have to make a commitment for meaningful change. And so, the buildings are going through these. So this is basically every certified staff. I will say, because in total transparency, one thing that has come up that Ann and I have been problem solving is that we recognize that some of our special teachers, because when we do a CSIs, they might have department CSIs. So we're looking at our structures and making sure that we don't miss our specials teachers when they get pulled for separate things. But other than that, all certified staff are receiving this. So when you talk about training and you talk about accountability, we're starting, and it's a starting point. I'm not going to lie to you. If I had my way and I could make as many days. Well, I guess technically you could, but if I could make as many days of the year, I know Julie's like, be quiet, Teresa. But I would add additional time because, schools are villages, and we're all very connected to the work that's happening there. So I'm always looking for ways to connect with other staff who have real impact on the day-to-day lives of our students. So it's not just certified staff, and I'm very well aware of that. But it's a starting point, and we will cycle this to the next group, and we'll cycle this to the next group so that we're building capacity. And so, I think if I were gonna, because I know Julia was gonna be like, Teresa, you're talking too much. So what the whole point of this is that we're looking to have staff do things differently, right? It's not just you learn something, because that's really great. We did during 2020, we all did a lot of reading. People did a lot of protesting. They did a lot of marching. They did a lot. And then we personally, myself, being in this role, not within this district, but being within this role, what I saw was a swift backtracking, swift. Our goal is not to just inform people of things that are good ideas. I'm very much more interested in changing your practice. I'm interested in how we address behavior in the moment without escalating it. You as the adult are responsible for doing that, right? Something happened, you're going to address it. Your job is not to escalate what's happening in that moment. Asking questions instead of issuing directives. I don't know about you, but nobody likes to be told what to do. Paul and I sometimes have some conversation about that. Separate the student from the behavior, and reducing shame. It's something you did. It's not who you are, right? I've been doing a lot of conferencing with parents, with students. I think one thing I'm proud of is even have the opportunity to conference with parents of students who have done something wrong. So it's not just the student who the parent, not just making sure that the student who had something done wrong to them, but the other side of that equation, and I think that's so important for us to be able to have those conversations and to talk about it, and to eliminate this idea of shame when it comes to, I made a mistake. You don't learn when you stay stuck in shame. And then, for teachers, resolving local issues locally, like in their room, so it doesn't need to become an administrative issue. As a classroom teacher, I won't lie to you, you never left my classroom to go to somebody else. You were way more worried about what you did to upset the culture in my room than you would ever been of my principal, any principal I've ever had, because that was our culture, right? Like we had commitments to each other. And so who cares what principal so-and-so thinks? And to be honest, as a principal, that's what I inspired in my teachers. Why would you want to send them to me? Like, yeah, I can handle it. I can always handle it. But you may not like how I handle it. Then you're upset with me because you didn't like how I handled it. Or they came back smiling. Now you're mad about that. Like, I don't know what you want me to do. But the reality is it's harder to have the conversation with the person who you have upset the apple cart with than it is to have it with a completely unconnected person. So my role does not define my relationship. And so our goal is that teachers have the strongest relationships with their students, that the adults in the building have the strongest relationships, and that becomes like the nexus of how our communities work. And so, we're really working on culture being led and not left to chance. That's really our goal with our training. And like I said, I'm incredibly proud of the work that our staff is doing and continues to do. But we absolutely positively cannot do this without the support of the rest of the communities. And the easiest people to ask, for me anyway, is families, to make sure that you have those conversations, and that you broaden those conversations outside your own sphere of like what impacts you. So that way we can kind of build this cross understanding. But I'll stop and wait for any questions, because I could literally do this all night. Sorry.
Thank you. Jason?
Yeah, so first of all, just thank you. While it's a semi-annual report, it is a first ever semi-annual report. The speed, I'm very appreciative, I think I speak for all of us, with the speed with which you guys turn this around. I think this is only a few weeks old in terms of policy for us. It's a very thoughtful presentation. I think your passion and your commitment to this work is very clear. I think what you may hear a little bit of us kind of thinking out loud tonight about, and things that you brought up, was how do you quantify this, right? We're looking at really metrics of impact, and that's really difficult. For me, I think it would be helpful if we kind of walk a little bit more through these charts and maybe how I'm supposed to read the tables together. It gives the impression, I could be completely wrong, that the first table is like a chart of all the challenging behaviors, and then the second one, which would be those that result in student discipline, that would be a subset of the first table? Is that?
Correct. Thank you, because I know that, and this is our first ever, so we'll also incorporate.
It's our first too. So I think as a board, we're still kind of searching for what it is we're trying to measure and how best to do that. So.
Absolutely. So on page 18, it's really a summary of all offenses, of all behavioral offenses, and they're sorted, as Julio indicated, by the category types that are defined by the State Department of Education. So it is a total of over 1,300 separate offenses. And when you flip the page to page 19, what's important, it's roughly 300 that you see there, and those are the 300 that are mandated to be, while everything is reported to the state in some way, those 300 are the incidents that are specifically covered under the new regulations and the new state laws and the policy 5550, 5560, as it relates to, hey, challenging behavior that results in one of these very serious potential consequences. And then just to walk that line through, at the bottom of page 19, those roughly 300 incidents are then disaggregated by the students. And you'll see there are only 135 students reported there, AKA some students were involved in more than one incident. So we were very specific to not double count students to show any sort of disproportionality. And my apologies, as I'm looking at this and I'm thinking about it, you've got student counts, but you may not be as familiar with sort of the percentages in our demographics. So I'm going to give you, and this is off the top of my head in the moment, I apologize, this is not well researched, but for our Hispanic Latino population, that's roughly, I know it's greater than 20% or roughly 20% of our population, so I'm going to say in the neighborhood of 1,800 students total. So that 52, that incidence rate of 52, that's somewhere near 33%.
Paul, not to interrupt, but I do have actual numbers.
Oh, great. Oh, thank you so much. I'll shut up and let you walk them through the rest of that then.
No. So for, and I appreciate you giving that background. And it's one of those, you do the report and I'm like, oh yeah, I know exactly what this means. And thinking of it from your perspective, I can see that. And so again, on page 18, you'll see that all of those pieces, they don't necessarily result in one of those disciplinary infractions. And
so if I could stop you at that point. So what we're actually seeing, if you read those two charts together, is we are probably seeing some of the effects of this kind of restorative practices at work, when in the past those may have all resulted in discipline at some point.
I actually would say probably more accurately, what you're seeing is that the challenging behaviors, there were certain conditions that had to be met for it to be considered, that had to be reported as challenging behavior. Like you needed to either be removed from the class, in school suspension, out of school suspension, or expulsion, right? So that's really, like, I think part of the difference of what you're seeing is that, like, for challenging behavior, to be identified as that, like, only certain things qualified. Like, so if you were late for class, that's not a challenge, that wouldn't be considered a challenging behavior, and wouldn't be like on this chart.
Yeah, because to go back to the school policy violations, that's like detention or lunch bunch or something. Lunch detention.
And so again, I think some of the onus of that is really not wanting kids out of class, right? And so I think there was some concern that something, perhaps a misuse of a hall pass, could have resulted in a in-school suspension for 3 days if there's not a calibration of that. And so again, not something that we were doing, but I think when you look at some of the, data across the state, right, and that's the thing that I know that they're looking at, is to look at those pieces. What I will say is, I have the one big change I think that I've seen this year especially is really that push with really looking at proactive approaches to when they see students getting to a point where it may be becoming either dysregulated or whatever that would be. And I've seen that really as not only a real skill set from our teachers, but also from our students. And again, it's been a little bit since I've been in the building, but that's been a real clear piece. And I know that we even messaged that really with teachers is, hey, when you see that, like, think about the supports that we have in place in the building so that a student doesn't need to get to that point. And it's a simple going over and maybe saying, hey, do you want to see your school counselor? And the kids are happy to go do that. Or thinking about what proactive approaches, as Teresa mentioned, that some of our students perhaps have a pass that they don't need to go ask the teacher. The teacher just knows, oh, that student can go see their school counselor when they need to. So I think that's one of the reasons why we've seen some of those dips.
Right, and again, that gets back to the metrics of impact are difficult, and that's going to be an area for growth, and I think obviously we'll have some ideas on that as well as you.
Yeah, and truthfully too is we don't, with everything going on in the building, we don't always hear every little thing that a teacher does. That we'd love to hear that so we can give them kudos for that. Like, hey, great job in the way you were able to proactively either de-escalate that or you brought a student out in the hall, whatever that was, that so that you were able to have a respectful conversation with the student where they trusted you to be able to do that. They weren't embarrassed. They didn't feel singled out, and that they can learn about, like, hey, here's what we need to do to continue to meet the norms and the expectations we have in this classroom. And so, I think that, and Teresa's done a lot of work too, is just with starting with some of those clear respect agreements right from the start. I mean, you walk into many of our, if not all of our elementary classrooms, and they've got them right there posted so the teachers can point to them and remind students, right? And because sometimes we need those little reminders, but and then to go back to, I think, where Paul was going with our numbers. So when you look at the Asian, we have a little over 1,106 students total when I looked at it earlier today. 918 Black/African American, 1,663 Hispanic Latino, and then 4,923 white students. And so that total that I had there was around 9,110 students that I was able to pull from the quick poll that I had done here. So when you look at that number and then, you sort of look at that's one, each one of those counts for one student, you're looking at about 1%. And so that's why I go back to that piece that, there's something to be proud of that. But as I used to always say, the speech I used to give a lot of times to my faculty was, hey, if you're in that 99%, if that's your kid, that's great. But if your kid is in that 1%, like, then all of a sudden that's not so great, right?
No,
and so I think,
acknowledging that we've come a long way
Yeah.
does not mean that we're there, that it's perfect, that it's not an ongoing process. I think you've done a really good job of stating that and laying that out. And I think we'd all like it to move faster or to have more resources to do that. But we're working on that. I'm really appreciative of that, and just know that the work you're doing is so foundational to the very mission of every child, every day, that sense of belonging, right? That's what this is about. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I just want to give again kudos to the folks in the building because, I think of our principals that are leading, people like Susan that are not only leading in the work, but they believe in the work, right? And I think it's one thing to go and to hear the professional development that's being rolled out, but to then take it back to your building and have the same passion that Teresa and the team are delivering it with, and then deliver that to your faculty and embrace it, and then hold those expectations. Like that is the expectation in this school. And so really want to give kudos to them and then to the people in the classrooms, right? Our teachers, our paras, all of our support staff that have to actually do the hard work, right? When the student's making that choice that perhaps we wish they didn't, that they address it and they don't just look the other way, right? That they're going to tackle when they hear a word that's hurtful in the hallway. Right? It's easy to just turn the other way and pretend like you didn't hear it, but it's really important that our adults don't do that and that they address them and that we sit down and talk to students about what that means and the hurt that could cause if people hear it. So again, I really think it's important that we continue to just celebrate those folks.
Ethan?
Yeah, realizing this was the first time I had a couple comments on the schedules, if I could do that. I assume this covered fiscal year '25, but there's no date that I could find.
So this goes to September, whatever the first day of school was, till today.
Okay. It would just be helpful to have that in there.
Sure.
The dating. The next thing was, I assume that this is going to be compared to prior years and just we didn't get around, didn't have time for it?
So as I mentioned, the reason we didn't look down that path is because there's been so many changes in definitions that you wouldn't really be comparing apples to apples. And so, that's why we decided to really use this as a baseline to now be able to sort of highlight that and go forward.
Okay. I would have been interested, challenging incidents and challenging individuals, how many per, did one student have, were a number of students over 5 or, some way to, where the real, is it a smaller number, or is it every student did it 2 or 3 times in the challenging incidents? It's just me. The other thing was, do you have offenses by incident type category? Like particularly school policy violations? I assume that's in the challenging one and the non-challenging. It'd just be interesting to break out, because I tried going back initially to the 135 or 307, where there was challenging incidents, trying to figure out which those were.
Yeah, to my understanding, I know we talked about that earlier in the presentation. Julio gave a number of examples. To my understanding, there wouldn't be a school policy violation that results in a suspension or expulsion. These are typically minor infractions.
Well, there have to be, because otherwise you wouldn't have as many high school students. There's got to be some in there that, because high school students were 130, and if you take out the school policy, it's like 67.
Part of it is you have the asterisks, actually, when there's an asterisk at the end, and so you don't actually know what the number is, and that's done anytime that the numbers are off.
Those are less, his is less than 10, so that's only 40, max. The asterisks.
Oh, I see. You know what it could be? Because what's also included in school policy violations is attendance violations. So if there are multiple class cuts, that might result in school. So I take your point. We'll see how we can clean that up so to give you a better understanding.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know what school policy,
Yeah, but in general, just to make sure that there's clarity for the board and for the public, the school policy violations in general, in terms of what the nature of the offenses are less serious than pretty much all the other categories.
No, I understand. I assume
just to
there
make
was
sure
some
that
that
that's clear.
was challenging, and some weren't, but that'd be helpful. The 10 or fewer, the asterisk, is that really necessary? Because it just,
Yeah,
I don't know how you identify from.
Here, you wouldn't identify, like Ethan Goldman's not going to know. But if we're up here on television and we're talking about the one elementary school incident that involved an out-of-school suspension, and if that family happened to be listening, they would feel I would say, potentially a degree of personal violation because if questions arose about that, and even to your earlier question about, a number of students who had 5 or more, discipline, it's sort of like, yeah, it's an interesting thing to know, but I don't know what it does to support the board or the community. So some of those specifics, and with suppression, like there's a real reason it helps to not re-victimize a victim or victimize an offender, especially, at any age, students are going to learn from this. So I do appreciate that folks have a concern, but the whole point for us to have that asterisk and include the zeros is so that you can know when something's 0, and when you can know there is still some work to be done in with some of these things, but it's not a significant number.
All right. It's just, it makes it hard to follow when you add the numbers up and then you realize you missed something. Then the last one I had was, I think that was it. No, it's a good start, but it's just, if you could differentiate some of the things, it would be helpful. Thank
Yes, certainly, we'll take a look at that, and like I said, I want to just reiterate, because we looked at this multiple times, and really read back to how the state reports out their data too when they're reporting out, and they do use asterisks, and actually, I think we looked at trying to figure out, sometimes 20 is the end, sometimes it's 5, it really depended, and so I think we wanted to err on the side of caution when it came to student confidentiality and privacy, knowing that some of these are sensitive issues that we've had to deal with students and families, and in a smaller setting, like Paul mentioned, perhaps you may have one elementary, and they'll know. We may not know, or the folks in this room may not know, but that school community probably would know. So, but I appreciate where you're coming from on that, Ethan. I just wanted you to know that we tried to be as transparent as possible in this report.
And I understand you're trying to protect people. I'd say if you could give more definition, because there's obviously challenging school policy violations, and there's not as challenging.
Yeah, I'll follow up with Paul too, and that we can look at essentially sharing the ED 166 report. I mean, it's public, you can see it. We originally looked at doing that, and some of them, like the school policy violation, I think it may have like 15 or 20 codes in there that it just became so cumbersome, but certainly can share that link with Paul, and he can share that with you folks on the board.
Then one last question I just remembered. In-school suspension, is that like 1 day, 5 days? I was just trying to understand this, what it is.
So when you see it here, it's just an in-school suspension that occurred, but there are a different length of in-school suspensions depending on the incident that occurred. Sometimes too, it's depending on when they're meeting with the child, right? We don't want to, if an incident occurs and that student may not be ready to go back to class, then we want to also make sure we're not setting students up for failure and just saying, hey, it was 1 day, good job, see you later. Like, we want to make sure we've processed and had those conversations, as Susan has highlighted, that oftentimes those are great conversations students are having, but sometimes perhaps they're not ready to hear it either. And so needing to make sure that we're doing all those pieces. But for the purposes of this, each one is one, you can look at it as one incident.
Okay. I was just trying to understand the difference between removal from class and school suspension.
So a removal from class may be that student is removed from that class, but they're back the next period, let's say at the high school level. So an incident occurs in my period 2 class, I'm removed from it, I go down to the office, I have a conversation with my administrator, I process it, and then I can go to my next period. So the state does want all of those recorded because they want to know when students were out of that classroom and essentially missing instruction. But perhaps the incident wasn't something that really required the student to miss additional class time and now can really go back and continue on with their day.
Okay, thank you, I'm good.
John?
Well, I also want to thank all of you for the report. Teresa, it's really good to meet you for the first time. Susan, same. I just had a question generally about the reporting and about the quality assurance in terms of the statistics. So who decided which category to group the various incidents into? So like let's say you have 2 kids at an elementary school who get into an altercation of some an altercation. Maybe it's a fight. Maybe it's something less. Who made the decision to put that incident into a category for purposes of reporting and this study? And was there any way of sort of vetting that once the decision was made the first time?
Yeah, so that's, some really good work we've been doing too, and I know Susan maybe even want to talk about that, is from day one, we've been working hard on calibration, because I think that's one of the things we want to make sure that we are comparing apples to apples and that there aren't differences at the school, which is why, oftentimes when an incident occurs, first administrators will go to this ED 166 report, which has definitions in there, and so you're trying to find like, okay, which definition does this best meet? But when you get into those, we'll call them a little bit trickier ones, you call your colleagues and you just say like, hey, what do you think? What do you think? And then ultimately they call me. And that really one of my roles is to make sure that we're calibrated across the district. And what I do too is like, I'll run reports as the weeks go on, and as every week or so I'll run one. If something pops to me that I didn't hear of, I'm like, well, that's strange. I'll call the school and say, hey, can you walk me through this? What happened? And so that we can look at those pieces to make sure that we're calibrated too. And as you talk about, and I'm glad that you highlight that, Jonathan, is because I think that is one of the areas of work that we need to continue to do. And I think we've come a long way from where we were, but it's certainly sometimes in those conversations, and we'll call them the tabletop exercises, right? Where we'll walk through like, here's a scenario that happened. How would you code this? And if we're not calibrated on that, then having the conversation of, hey, why did you do that? Or how, or to make sure that that is coded accurately, so that when we look across the schools and we look across grade levels, we'll start to see some of those consistencies there. I don't know if you wanted to add to that, Susan?
No, I think that's exactly right on track. And our tabletop exercises, or, whatever we want to call them, a lot of times we'll start a meeting, or at some point in a meeting, someone will bring up, without any identifiable information, as Julio mentioned before, a specific incident for the elementary team to kind of calibrate on and see what might we have done. And one of the things that has been really interesting that's come out of that, because of some of this new legislation, because it's really important to have those conversations, not only with my role like 10 other elementary principals, but also Julio at Town Hall, is what's been interesting about some of those tabletop exercises or problem of practice is it's not necessarily XYZ. It's really been wonderful to see the questions that have come out of that, which speaks to kind of the training that we're all going through and understanding the story. It's not always XYZ. It's what questions might I have if I was faced with this scenario during a fourth grade recess, and what might I need to find out more about? And so that's been very helpful as a group to calibrate, especially with any new legislation or policy. That's been very important. And I can say that all the principals are very adept at picking up the phone and calling each other, calling Town Hall, hopefully not too much, but we are, as we try to navigate this together, it's been a wonderful network to do this with.
Thank you. And the only other question I had, when we looked at these numbers, I was somewhat taken aback by, and Julio mentioned this, by the number of Hispanic students who seem to have had been recorded as having one or more challenging behavior incidents, and then received one of the more severe sanctions. By the numbers, it does appear very disproportionate, relative to the population. And I was wondering if, I know this is our first year really putting all this together, but given your experience in the district, do you think this is an aberration, or what are you seeing from these numbers compared to your experience both in the classroom and at Town Hall?
I think, and even Ann McKernan and I have had conversations, because she's really monitoring our chronic absenteeism numbers, and to look at, the through line that we're having and seeing. And I think, the piece to say is that I think what it's done is really just say, we need to just name it and start to really proactively think about how do we tackle this, and not just look at numbers and say, oh, right? And that's why really bringing in Teresa and having her in front of our team and saying, here they are, right? Like, and I don't know that we used to really dive into them so closely and so regularly to track and to look for patterns and to look and to see, because, one of the things that we're starting to really take a look at now too is like, where are these behaviors occurring? Because, when we start to look at, particularly at maybe the high school, right, and we start to see that many of these behaviors are happening, let's say, in the hallways or in lunch, and they're not happening in classrooms. And so it starts to help us get an understanding of, okay, like that also helps us see, is it some of the unstructured time? Is it something with perhaps like the lunch waves are maybe just a little too long, like whatever that would be. And so I think the data, it's something that helps us ask a lot more questions, and I hope to be able to come back to start to say like, hey, here's some of the stuff we started to tackle and started to look at. But, to answer your question, Jonathan, I was certainly taken back by it. But it is, as we started to look at some of our other data points, it's the same sort of subgroups that are causing us to look at them and needing to just now say, we've just got to look at this and tackle and come up with legit plans on what we need to do to start to do that. And I think what Teresa mentioned is one of the things that we're really doing is sitting with kids, right? And sitting down with groups and doing focus groups and saying like, hey, help us. Like, what do you think? What are we missing? Right? I think oftentimes we as adults like to sit down and brainstorm great ideas, and then you go talk to kids and like, what are you doing? And so instead of wasting our time doing that, we want to go sit down with them. And I know that Paul and Teresa do that every year, right? They meet with the seniors and sort of say like, hey, walk us through like what worked, what didn't work, what do we need to do better? And we want to take that same approach with these types of pieces and to say like, hey, here's the numbers. We've seen a heightened in, whatever insubordination, let's just say across. Like, what is it? What's causing that? To take a look at some of those pieces so that we can start to hear, what do kids say? And I know that's the work that at the elementary level they do so well, and start to do those pieces and trying to think of at the secondary level as the numbers get a little bit larger, like how do we take that and break it down? So perhaps it's our school counselors who've got a smaller caseload, partnering with the assistant principals and really starting to tackle those things and then start to draw through lines of what are we hearing across the school? What are we hearing across the district? To start to tackle some of those different pieces. So I hope that answers your question, Jonathan, a little bit.
It does, and I know this is really just the beginning. And the only other two data points I would like to see maybe for next time, I would like to see how many incidents are recorded as having taken place on school grounds versus out of school incidents that come to the district's attention. I'd like to see what proportion there. I would also be curious to see how many result in criminal referrals as well.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Is the number of arrests, is that part of the PPR report at the end of the year?
I don't recall off the top of my head. We'll have to look at that.
Okay.
And when you're talking about that, you're talking about actual arrests?
I mean, actual arrests are certainly quantifiable. I guess the question is if you could quantify, say, referral to law enforcement as well. I mean, if that's quantifiable, I'd be curious to see that as well.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that. I know,
I know
again,
arrests is certainly a hard data point.
yeah, I think one of the things that we've looked at really is also that partnership with our West Hartford PD and even with them and having them look at some of their practices and going down a JRB route instead of perhaps some of these different pieces. Most of our discipline referrals and discipline that are going to be on school grounds or off school grounds would probably be more related to, I would say, the drugs, alcohol, and tobacco infraction. Which I also wish that we could break those separately because, and I think that's the problem with some of these when you cluster them together and I can't break them apart to say, right, it's a different, I'll just make up a number. If I said, hey, we had 15 drug incidents, I think that's very different than if I said, hey, we had 15 tobacco incidents, right? Both are bad, and I disagree with kids doing both of those. However, I do think they're different. And so we're not able to break that up. And so trying to conceptualize, like, what does that look like as well is a piece. But, we'll take a look at that. And, I do appreciate some of the feedback that we're getting, and I know that Paul, I can guarantee, is writing things down, and I'm writing things down, and Teresa is, because, like I said, I think our biggest piece is wanting to partner with everybody, right? Partner with parents, partner with caregivers, partner with teachers, partner with, community members, because at the end of the day, the old saying, right, it takes a village. And I'm not sure, what other districts. I don't know any other district that's necessarily being as transparent and upfront about the work. And so I do think that speaks to the value that we put in this, and that we recognize that we need to do this and tackle this all together.
Well, again, thank you, and I really appreciate the work, and it's a great start.
LaToya.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentations. Awesome. Great start here. I have just a couple of things I wanted to lift up. Sorry, I forgot a little bit. All right, it's back. So one of them was around the proactive stuff, like the building trust. Something that I'm just reminded of in my own practice as an educator that I thought was really helpful was when rolling out restorative practices with the community, engaging in the conversations with families about it too, that we're rolling this out. Legislation came out from the state, but this is something that we've been committed to, and getting parents on board with it, offering them opportunities to get trained in some of the stuff that you named, Teresa, that was awesome, like affective statements and shame, all those things, because if we're doing it at school, but then they're at home and they're getting the traditional punitive consequences, then it can bump up against each other. The other thing was like, using the restorative justice process with families and students around the history of harm in the school system. That's how I got the buy-in from day one. Like, I sat with families and students and circled up and said, like, I recognize that the institution of education has harmed your families for generations, and you have no reason to trust us. And use the process with them, and then made a commitment, like, moving forward, like, we really want to do things with you. Like, we understand, and that's part of this practice. And so I think taking the practice and using it to actually address some of that harm, and like to say that we know where we've been, like we know the harm that we've caused, and this is a part of our commitment to move forward, is so powerful in getting the buy-in and strengthening those relationships. So that's one thing. The other thing I was thinking about too were the same thing as Ethan, just the school policy violations, and just trying to understand how, we can just support folks and not abdicating responsibilities to admin over some of those things, like misuse of a hall pass. Like, I'm like, why is that even recorded? Like, that's a conversation. And you don't have to be formally trained to ask what happened. What were you thinking? Like, who's been impacted? Like, what do you need to do next time, right? That's like the impromptu that you're talking about. So some of these things, I'm like, okay, it's great. And like, how can we support administrators with not having to be inundated with some of those things? And y'all gonna have to drag me along on the in-school suspensions in elementary school. I haven't seen it before. I didn't do that. I wouldn't do that. I mean, you gotta really sell me on this one.
So I want you to reframe. So by law, if we take you out of your classroom and you're not able to engage, that is what we must call it. We don't consider it that, right? We consider it, you're not ready to go back in the classroom, and that's real, right? Like, you know, let's say I'm a student in the classroom and I got upset with you and you're the teacher, and I decide to, like, I don't know, throw my shoe at you and hit you in the face. Let's be realistic about this. You as a teacher are a human being. You have feelings. You felt some way about it. The whole class watched you get hit with the shoe in front of your face. Now, this has not happened. Let me, before I go on with this story, Paul's like, Teresa, this has not happened. But I'm just trying to give you a very, like, over-the-top example.
Here's my question,
right?
though.
So wait. So now you, teacher, have some things you need to work through, right?
Right.
About this, because you love this child, but this child has caused harm.
Right.
And you, student, definitely need to de-escalate, and being in that space because now to somebody else, to other children in that room, you now seem like somebody who might be perceived as being dangerous and not safe to be around. So we have the stigma of what your decision, what you chose to do. You have a teacher who has been harmed, right? How, in what world would I say, oh, tomorrow, clean slate, here you go, back in the room? No, so our process of working through with kids, because anytime we remove you from your learning setting, we must classify it as basically you're in school suspension. Like that, because you're not in your learning space, right? And so we're removing you from that because you have some things that you need to work through. And you have to prepare yourself to do that. Like, we don't have the kid's just not here today. And to be honest with you, like, if I just send you home to your parent, I don't know that you're having the conversation that you need to have, right? We're responsible for making sure that you as a teacher you feel safe, right? And that you're ready to receive the student, and that the student is ready to be received, and that classroom has processed this moment that just happened. So we don't just say, hey, next day, here you go, back into the classroom, nothing's up. Like we have an obligation to make sure that everybody's safe. So I hear what you're saying about the wording, but I want you to think of that wording very differently about the practice of you need a moment. We need a moment. Everybody needs to process this, and then we can come back together and we figure out because how do I receive you back in the classroom? And how do I make sure that your students, like the other students in the classroom, receive you back in and don't see you as this person who had this, it was a moment, right? And so I think part of that process, in particular with really young kids, because they're not going to give it if you ask what do you think happened? You're not getting a straight answer. So you have it's a process that you go through,
Right.
And so
I get all that. I'm not trying to cut you off.
So that's why it's not really in
I
school
get all
suspension.
that. I get all that. I feel you. I feel you, my sister. And respectfully, I disagree because does that have to take an entire school day to do? If it's not the whole school day, is it really in school suspension? Do you see what I'm saying? Does it have to take the whole day?
It may not, but it may not. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Susan's
to my
got it.
understanding, Susan's got it, but to my understanding, it's not the whole day, right?
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be the whole day, but there are certain things that we are beholden to that are law and policy, and a part of what I was just kind of processing through as you're having this conversation is, in my mind as an administrator, I think about 90 minutes. So if a student is out of their classroom setting for 90 minutes or over, that needs to be counted as something a little bit differently than just a conversation in the office. So that doesn't mean that these are all 91 minutes or not, some might be a half day, full day, but there is some flexibility. And I do think, there does need that space and the grace to kind of process and think about. And if that happens to be over 90 minutes before the student is regulated again, unfortunately, and, we can keep opinions to ourselves about how we feel in our hearts about doing that, but we are bound by certain regulations, and 90 minutes out of the classroom is one of those.
Okay, so 90 plus. So that's my thing.
Okay.
That's all I'm like,
Okay.
It doesn't need to be the whole day.
Yeah, it doesn't. And it's certainly not always. And sometimes
Okay.
it can be. So, that it's so situational and everything is so different, but I felt like that was important to share.
Yeah, okay. No, thank you.
Miriam.
Thank you. It certainly seems like there has been a tremendous amount of effort and care and research to really ensure restorative practice in compliance with state mandate and certainly in the best interest of our students, from the executive team all the way through teachers, from what I'm understanding. And I have a couple questions. I first wanted to piggyback on what my colleague LaToya just brought up, which I think is a great idea, that parent buy-in is huge. And it would be great if I could make this suggestion that, evidence starting from the beginning. So the evidence that you're using to support the practice, to support the work in schools, to support the work with various communities, special education, et cetera, would be amazing to have accessible to the community for that kind of initial buy-in, and also to be able to then support parent understanding and participation with, also the availability of resources that perhaps are employed in the classrooms to be available for parents. So I think that's a great idea. I would love to see that also, to be able to, it's another way to support our students. I also wanted to piggyback on what my colleague John said or asked, which was, it also occurred to me that what we're seeing are the CSDE required reported incidents. This is of the 20% of the work of restorative practice, so to speak. And so I was just curious about the incidents that are not required by CSDE to be reported. And, Mr. Duarte, you mentioned the calibration across incidents in the district, so it made me wonder, what about, all these classrooms in the district where classroom management techniques are being utilized, and how that is being recorded and the data being tracked? Because I guess I'm trying to look at how is the impact going to be measured? So where is the data coming from? So we have the official CSDE data, but then certainly we have things that are going on in the classrooms. And it would be also helpful to know, because potentially incidents in the classrooms that are not reported could then lead to be CSDE reported incidents. So it would be helpful to kind of have some kind of baseline and understanding to follow trends, but also to see what issues are going on that perhaps aren't being addressed even by the way that these categories, according to CSDE, are listed. So just wondering if there is calibration, if there's kind of uniformity about classroom behaviors that teachers would be logging. It also seemed that in the restorative practice training manual that teachers are required to kind of log and share, their experiences and what's going on and whether, what the outcome was, and students as well who were old enough to engage and participate and answer surveys. So I'm curious about that data as well and what's being reported and identified by teachers involved and by students as well. And I guess big picture for me too is trying to understand this part was kind of the 20%, but looking at the 80% of like building community and trying to understand where is the data that we're showing the impact of restorative practice. Because I think about like our charge again as a board, and if we're looking at student achievement, which is quantifiable, we're looking at data, we're looking at scores, which is often, I think, supported by qualitative data, and that's important, and I recognize that. But I'm really trying to understand how do we track restorative practice, the impact, and the impact then on student achievement. So I'm hoping you could help make that connection or figure out or help us understand, where we can see that data going forward. That would be helpful. Thank you.
So, all those questions in one. I was like, oh, all right. So I'm gonna work on, I think, what maybe I can talk about, and then I'll pass to Julio. So, I think one of the things that if I could have had the ear of legislators when they, or even when they adopted this practice, to kind of add some input. One of the things that has been the thorn in my side is, it's like everything else, right? We call social emotional learning, SEL. We come up with these catch things, and then it diminishes from what it actually is. So I'm going to try to be really concrete about this, right? So culture and climate building is something that as a district we have always done. We have culture and climate surveys. We have done them, they're required by state law. We do them anyway because we want to know how people are feeling. We've always measured how people are feeling, right, about their school experience. Now, what I can tell you is what would be great is that every single person and every single family, which is, by the way, a plug when you get your culture and climate survey, please make sure you take it. It would be great if every single person filled it out, because then you actually can take that data. I think it's like 30%, right, becomes like a valid data source for us. So depending on schools, like we're always pushing to have more and more families be responsive, and to have more and more families representative of the school population, right, be responsive to that. So we've had to kind of come up with some, less favorable, because I know that everybody likes numbers, but we've had to come up with some other ways and other forms for us to be connected and know what our families are thinking. So we've been heavily engaged. We did street data study last year. We've been heavily engaged in focus groups across all levels. When you hear Titan Talks and Den Talks, again, what is it? It's student focus groups. It's students being able to come in and talk about what's working for them and what's not working for them. We do it across our elementary schools, every single elementary school. One of the things about, when you think about equity and the definition of equity is, understanding individually what people need and providing them that. Every school needs something different. So although I'm going to say that I want every single school, every single staff member, if I can get my hands on every single one, to have a certain level of understanding of the work that we do and the expectations for what we're looking for, when you take that data, and you referenced that they do reflections and surveys, so much of this work is self-work, and I think that there's we gloss over that, right? I'm asking the adults to monitor their ability to address things, right? And so, like, when I ask you to think about your practice as a teacher, it's not as a principal and certainly at a district level, I'm not asking you to take that, write it down, and hand it to me. Because the moment I make you do that, you are less engaged in actually doing that, or you're going to start scripting what you think I want to hear versus having the honest conversation. And so when you give people, we are professionals. When you give people the space in the room to self-evaluate and then to make a commitment for themselves, and maybe you find an accountability partner, right? Even amongst our principals, who's going to be your accountability partner to kind of hold you to what you've committed to? That's like the internal work that has to be done for real change to happen. And so you do all these things in combination. So like the student surveys, each building is doing their student surveys or their student focus groups, and they take it back to their team and they have conversations and they develop a plan unique to their school and the needs of their school in that moment, right? And that really, gets at the heart of what we're trying to do. I can't make a plan is going to work for every single school, because every single school has a different heartbeat. And we want them to have that different heartbeat. And I need you as a principal to know the heartbeat of your school and to be connected to your community so that you can make recommendations for change. And I do think that when you think about collecting the data, it's not that the data is not collected. I'm really excited for February 3rd. I'll have a panel of administrators and maybe some students so that you could see the work in action, so that you can start to understand how we're looking at data differently. Because one of the things that we've been cautioned about is this obsession we have for numbers. And people are not numbers, and experiences are not numbers. But when you can get people to tell you their lived experiences, when you're trying to change things, like the numbers, like, again, it's like our data, right? This tells us we have a problem. It raises a flag. It tells us, hey, look over here. Like something's not quite right here. We don't fix this by keep looking at this number. We fix this by actually having those focus groups with students and talking about, what do they think might be impacting, this number, right? What do they think? What are some practices they think that we as educators can look at differently? And so I appreciate numbers. Trust me, I came from a background where like everything had to be proved by data, but I've also learned that change happens when you connect with the people and you get to the heart of why things are happening, right? And so we're trying to balance both, and I promise you will continue to receive both, some data and some numbers. But the reality is like a lot of those numbers live at the building. They partner with us at central office and with our team. We come in, we help support. If you have a project that you're doing, we help that project. But really, we'll kind of dive it heavily into that at the next board meeting, so you could actually talk directly to principals and you could talk to them and ask them about the data specifically from their building. And I think last year when we presented, I know you weren't on the board at that point, but like we had, like Shannon was here and had presented about what she did in her building, and she took that data and then that sparked a change in her, like, 'cause that's what we're looking for. I'm looking for adults to change their behavior to impact student behavior and experiences. Like that's the goalpost. That's what we're really looking for, because we are the model for students, and that's really the highest level of achievement when it comes to this work, is adult behavior impacting student behavior. And I might have missed, and Julia might have had some other questions.
I was just going to say, in the interest of time, I'm just mindful of the hour. Did you have, because I had a summary thing, I was just going to go.
I do. So actually, that leads me to my last question, which was really just seeking some clarification around a statement that was made prior, which was, we don't, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, or please clarify to make sure, but it was something along the lines of, we don't need to learn different ways hate shows up. So I'm hoping you can help clarify with the recent statement that, adult behaviors are impacting our students.
Yeah.
Can you help me understand
Yeah.
exactly?
So
Thank you.
particularly when it comes to elementary school students, let me clarify that statement. Learning the nuances of me talking to you, because again, I don't know how to put it without like offending somebody, so I'll just use myself as an example. Me talking to you about the different ways that I receive hate as I travel the world is impactful for you. It may touch your heart. It may not, right? That's I for as much as I'd like to believe that everybody wants their heart to be changed and to kind of see us all as, equal, et cetera. Like, I don't have any guarantee of that. Where we have impact is where I can influence the practices that we use so that I can ensure, right, that we are not deliberately doing things that are going to make you feel like you don't belong, right? So I have better impact. Instead of me trying to either convince you of my experience or give you, 20 million different examples of the different things I experienced, which again, not saying it's not might not be helpful for you to know, but our job is to impact behavior and change. And so, and you'll never know the nuances. You'll never be able to be as, if I told you them all, right? And I told you about microaggressions and I told you about the different microaggressions I experience, you'll be sitting in a room and we're hearing something that, I hear, and for me is clearly a microaggression. You may not hear it. And there's no part of the trouble with this work is if I expect you to hear it, right? That's part of the trouble. Like, it'd be great if it's really obvious. I hope we all hear it, right? But I will never expect you to understand the nuances like I do. And so when we make that expectation and when we give people that belief that if you don't hear it in the same way that I hear it, that then it's, either it's not valid or you don't care, you scare people away from wanting to do the work. So then what can I engage you in? I can engage you in, how we speak to each other. Intent, impact versus intent, right? And so I'll apologize because it wasn't my intent to make you feel like that's what I meant when I said that, right? Because the reality is it's the impact versus the intent of what you were saying. And so it would be impossible for me to have you develop the nuanced understanding of racial anti-Black sentiment in the way that I know it. And if I try to teach you that, you're going to become frustrated, I'm going to become frustrated with you. And so that's what I'm trying to get at. It's not a matter that we shouldn't learn. Of course, on some level, we learn these things. But if you teach somebody with the expectation that they now are going to have your level of understanding, perfection is the enemy of all things that have to do with this work, and that becomes problematic. And I think, as professionals, part of our license covers that we make sure that all students feel safe. And I think that we all recognize when something's happening that makes a student not feel safe. Hopefully that makes that,
yes,
that clarifies.
It helps. I guess I'm just trying to understand, perhaps maybe it's not an issue of perfection, but, kind of a baseline education and acknowledgement. And I guess what I'm curious about is, there's a lot of focus on cultural competency and systemic racism and conversation about race. And I'm just curious, especially in the CSDE reporting, if a third of that is, racial slur and hate crime, is there anything in the middle, and where are we getting the things in the, issues in the middle? So whether it's anti-Semitism, other forms of hate, and so where are we then at baseline educating, ourselves, staff, to then be at least in the realm of acknowledging and understanding, oh, this is actually, if somebody says this is an anti-Semitic trope, or this means this for this specific group. So how do we then, even at baseline, say we're going to have more understanding?
Yeah, no, I think I understand, and I appreciate both points. I think, and I know that you're worried a little bit about the time, and we'll probably have more opportunity to talk about this. In general, because I think the question was originally framed in around the elementary level, and at the elementary level, the effort is very strategic to identify, to use this line of the slurs, and it's not just racial slurs among those. There were, instances of some anti-Semitic. There were some instances of disparaging comments towards students with disabilities or what have you. The effort, if and when something like that occurs at the elementary level, is to educate how it's painful, hurtful, but the majority of our efforts really stem for how can we provide students with an understanding of differences in culture, in history, in religion, in race, ethnicity, in family structure, and we do a lot of that through trying to uplift, both share a variety of different elements of identity and provide uplifting stories. When incidents occur, there's one-on-one conversations where there's an expression of why that's hurtful and why that's not appropriate, and that becomes something, but it's very separate from I think some of the learning that might happen at an older developmentally appropriate age, where you kind of get into some of that through different curricular connections, historical connections, and other pieces where that gets where a more nuanced understanding starts to occur.
And I apologize if I wasn't clear, and I was specifically concerned about the adults who were in charge of the behavior. So not the kids, because understanding elementary is certain, but and I apologize that I was not clear. I was thinking about the adults, and the adults who were charged then with handling such issues and their level of education and kind of baseline comfortability with,
That's a whole different conversation.
I apologize.
So
that's really what I was getting at, is the adults
My
in
bad.
the room. To piggyback off, the adults who,
so
as you said.
So again, for example, the administrators who would be, again, it's reported, it happened, something happens, it's reported, that's always going to the principal's office. And the principals do have and continue to have extensive training and conversation about all the things that we need to be aware of, right? Including anti-Semitism, including, anti-Blackness. So yes, you're absolutely right. So the people who are responsible for handling that, we have these conversations. I kid you not, they just had an elementary principal meeting. We literally just went over and they were provided resources and we talked about it. So that is ongoing, an ongoing commitment for us to have those conversations. So I appreciate that. Sorry, Miriam.
And then Jennifer, did you still have a comment?
Hi, everyone. Yes, thank you, Shannon. I'll be brief. First, like everyone, I want to thank you for sharing this information with us tonight. I think it's a really good start to the conversation. Coming into the board, one of the concerns I had was, Black and brown kids being treated with discipline actions differently than white kids or other peers. And I think one of the really important pieces of this report is going to be comparing data over time. And I hear you on that. This is the first time we're seeing numbers, and we're going to have to be a bit more patient to compare that. So I just want to point that out, that's definitely something I want to know more about, and I'm curious about, and I think is a challenge that is incredibly time sensitive. And I know, or I'm learning, I should say, all that you do as administrators and school leaders, and it's incredible to me. And still, I just feel the need to point out that this is something, that is just incredibly important. And I am really looking forward to working on this and, doing all that we can to support our students. So I'll leave it there, given the hour, and thank you for sharing everything this evening.
Thank you.
It is 10:35, Teresa. Well, thank you. Just to say, I do just appreciate your spirit of continuous learning with respect to this report and the process in which things are reported and definitions that have been a moving target and seem to have settled. So we look forward to establishing the baseline, and it sounds like we're going to hear significantly more about the actual implementation of restorative practices at the February 3rd meeting. And I think, speaking to what Miriam said, hearing kind of how while it's unique to each school, how there is some baseline or standardization at some level so that there's a calibration and consistency in the way that it's being implemented, a fidelity to the implementation. I think everyone is going to look forward to that. Unfortunately, I will be missing the February 3rd meeting, but I will watch it on our wonderful TV station. So thank you all for your time and effort in this, and we wish you a good evening. All right. Can we power through this, guys?
We can power.
We got to power. Okay. So moving on to routine matters, the financial report. Approval of the financial report for the period ending November 30th, 2025. Can I have a motion that the Board of Education approve the financial report for the period ending November 30th, 2025?
To do so expeditiously.
Thank you, Jason. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ethan. And who is planning to report on this, John or Ethan?
I'll be reporting at a very high expeditious level.
Beautiful. Go ahead, John.
Especially because we have Barbara here. So Ethan and I met with Barbara last Wednesday to go over the financial examiner's report. I can report that as of November 30th, 2025, the projections remain on track with the anticipation of a $15,000 surplus in the $214 million general fund budget for the end of the fiscal year. All of the exact numbers aren't at page 20 of the board materials. And I would just report that on the major lines, the salary lines, we are projecting to be about $65,000 under budget. In terms of the major details, there's currently an unfavorable variance of $375,000 on the teachers line due to increased staffing needs, specifically 6 more elementary classrooms than anticipated, as well as an increase in salaries due to professional growth, but that was offset by less expensive new hires. We've had a $240,000 savings in pupil services because of Connecticut seed funding to fund some new special education classrooms and offset current salaries. And we currently have a custodial payroll savings of $100,000 due to vacancies, but that was offset slightly by an overtime overage. We've also have a $75,000 savings on maintenance, offset on other lines because of the need to outsource facility services. Specifically, there is a $50,000 overage on the purchase services line, mainly because of those vacancies in the maintenance area. We received grant awards and carry forward authorizations in the amount of $4,133,490, with $3,852,956 available for public school use. And nutrition services is running a profit of $11,798 in November. And that is all I have at the highest, most expeditious level. And Barbara is here to answer any questions as always.
Welcome, Barbara. Thank you for staying with us so late into the evening. Any questions or discussion? Jennifer, anything on your end?
No.
Great. All right, moving to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the motion passes. Thank you. Moving on, can I have a motion that the Board of Education approve the minutes from the regular Board of Education meeting of December 16th, 2025?
Moved. Second.
Thank you, Ethan. Thank you, John. Any discussion? Any changes? Okay. Nope. Moving to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the motion passes. Now moving on to information and reports. Do any board members have reports from any other boards or organizations? Okay. Any other information or discussion? Future business, just announcements of the future meeting dates of the board. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, February 3rd, 2026, regular Board of Education meeting here in the Town Hall Chamber, Legislative Chamber Room 314 at 7 p.m., followed by Wednesday, note the change because of the holiday President's Day that week, will be a Wednesday meeting on February 18th, 2026, again here in the Legislative Chamber 314 at 7 p.m. Any requests for future agenda items? Miriam?
Do I have to make it in the motion, or do I just ask? Oh, okay. Is it possible to add specific, again, incident reporting, because I know it's been asked in the past by members of the last board, parents, community members, for incident-specific, which seems like perhaps they're not counted in the CSDE around anti-Semitism and other hate-related incidents. That would be helpful.
So they are counted, just to be clear, that, I thought Julio mentioned it, it's under personally threatening behavior, and while there's a total of 60 across the district, there's roughly a third of those, so it's just over 20 that are associated specifically, and that's broad, that's not specific to anti-Semitism. I can tell you in that code from our review, to my knowledge, there were only a handful of anti-Semitism, but it is inclusive of some incidents of anti-Semitism, use of slur words relating to race, ethnicity, the N-word and such, some use of disparaging remarks regarding students with disabilities was one that came up a couple of times for a total of just about 20 incidents. So that was included. Just to put that out, but we can talk more offline about if there's something more that you guys are looking for.
Or perhaps to add it to policy committee agenda. And I don't know if it's too late now for the policy committee on Thursday.
I don't know. What policy would that be?
Potentially either new ones to discuss with Shipman, also to incorporate specific language in our current existing policies.
I think we would need kind of something more specific that we're looking at.
Okay, we can talk about
Yeah.
it.
Okay, so we'll take that offline and follow up. Okay, great. Any other agenda item requests? All right. Any comments from visitors? Seeing none. Oh, yes? What?
Is it too late? Sorry. To add
Are you a
future-
visitor?
No, sorry. Sorry, future agenda item, Emma Ruler. Discussion about a formal Board of Education curriculum committee.
So, and I do think that's something that would potentially originate at the policy committee before coming to the full table,
Okay.
but we can have follow-up conversation about that agenda and timing.
Okay, trying to understand.
Yes,
the-
yes.
The process, thank you.
All right. There's no executive session, so seeking a motion to adjourn seeking a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Ethan. Second.
Second.
Thank you, John. Meeting adjourned at 10:43 PM. Thank you.